Brett say anything?
Just being fashionably late. You get you a bigger desk or a smaller computer.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular Board of Trustees meeting for February 25th, 2025. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Quick week all roll, please.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Here.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Albrecht. Trustee Ayers.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy, Trustee Wing, and Trustee Kurtz are absent.
All right. Well, we still have a quorum here, so we'll keep going. Next on the agenda is citizen participation. This is a chance for the audience to speak to anything that is not on tonight's agenda. I did make one exception, and that's for Ms. Ruth Fletcher Carter, given that her connection in founding RAF and that she cannot stay till the end of the meeting. I thought that was appropriate that she be able to speak under the general comment. But we'll start off with Bridget Guccione. Hope I got that right. When you come to the front, folks, if you could please state your name and your address, even though it's written down here, and then I'll try to, if we could keep it to 3 minutes or less. And I appreciate you coming out today.
Okay, I time myself at home, so I should be
Perfect.
good.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Bridget Guccione, my address is 810 Berthoud Peak Drive. My husband has some documents that you were given a couple of weeks ago, but I thought to give you a paper copy tonight might be helpful.
All right.
After participating in the town's planning process for new developments in Berthoud during 2023 and 2024 calendar years, I observed inconsistencies and disconnects in the process from conception to planning commission and trustees' approval or denial. These observations and a desire to work to improve the process for future projects prompted me to research the methods used in other communities across the country and abroad. I researched how communities address the housing crisis, incorporating different types of densities and designs. Resources ranged from real estate professionals, successful developers, legal authorities, and professional organizations, for example, the American Planning Association and the American Society of Planning Officials. A consistent thread noted between most resources was the value of buffer zones in achieving successful development of communities. Many of the resources noted the use of what they termed as gentle density, transitioning between existing housing and new higher density developments. The current Berthoud Code does not sufficiently address buffer zones and the value provided by the proper use of those zones to develop our own town. The code defines terminology ranging from arcades to bollards to driveways, but buffers are not defined in our code, even though they are referred to in several sections. In the Berthoud Code, buffers or transitional spaces are used predominantly between industrial and residential areas or natural areas for noise and visual mitigation. It is, however, documented that buffers also provide economic benefits, cultural preservation, and community interactions. I propose the addition to the code of components that incorporate buffering or gradation between developments of differing densities using the technique described as gentle density. These additions will address the economic benefits of buffers by enhancing or maintaining property values. The example codes that are in the document that I provided to the board and staff illustrate verbiage and concrete examples and targets that remove the ambiguity and the vagueness or judgment in the planning process. So that's why I tried to give you some documentation beforehand. Whether in setting personal goals or community targets of our own town, we should strive to remove vagueness and ambiguity and follow the SMART acronym: specific, measurable, achievable, results-oriented, and time-bound doesn't really apply to the city as much as it does to personal codes. And I would like to volunteer and participate in any manner appropriately to help change the code in this fashion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll definitely be keeping this in mind. And again, I want to apologize for sending that out to the trustees so late last time. So thank you for waiting for this meeting. So we had plenty of time to read through it. Thank you again. Ruth Fletcher Carter.
Just a small aside, you might want some more hearing assistance. Doesn't look like Forrest's gonna meet the age
requirements
capacity
tonight
we
are-
have here.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, my name is Ruth Fletcher Carter, and I'm the founder of RAF. I retired a year ago and am now Citizen Ruth. However, it has not taken away from me my passion for transportation. I attended your February 11th meeting and even spoke briefly and heard the presentation by Steve Conway explaining the growth of RAFT. Apparent to me, and I believe to you also, by the questions that you posed, is that there's a seeming overlap in population served and in the services provided. Not one individual, however, who benefits from these services wants these services to go away. They are dependent on them, and they are lifelines for many of them. We can agree, however, that the efficiency of these services might be improved by the aligning of services where there is overlap and the providing of new services where gaps occur. This aligning and designing cannot occur following a single presentation and a follow-up survey. I am urging you, the trustees, to appoint a working subcommittee from among yourself, RAFT board members and staff, BATS staff, and community representation to review the myriad of data and recommendations already available and to weigh each option in depth and draw conclusions. From the conclusions of these subcommittees, that they propose the most efficient and effective approach for transportation for Berthoud back to the Board of Trustees. Once a proposal is accepted by the trustees, establishing, I think that once you accept the proposal, then you need to either extend the poor long labor of the committee or appoint a new committee to hammer out the details among the stakeholders. That would be BATS, RAFT, the community, microtransit, any other transit services, looking at our regional connections and looking at our state connection, particularly now that we have a mobility hub at the corner of 25 and 56. The Berthoud Transit Study of 2022 is a snapshot from 10,000 feet. The Berthoud committees that I want you to appoint will address with boots on the ground. They may conduct additional studies, seek input where they feel more is needed, and address all organizations, again, BATS, RAFT, possibly microtransit, regional transportation, and state transportation options.
Ruth, we're well over. I'm just going to let you go for another 20 seconds here.
Okay, well, I'm coming down to the thank you for listening.
Okay, well, sorry to interrupt you.
Okay.
I know your comments are very important to this conversation at the end here. So.
And thank you for also sharing in my observations and expectations. I am hopeful that this Board of Trustees has the will to accept the challenge and make transportation your combined legacy for the Bertha community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Okay, the rest, Mr. John Guthrie.
My name is John Guthrie. I live at 2142 Jones Place. And before I forget, I brought some information for your point man, Brian Dubois, regarding the dark sky. This is in regards to the town of Nasby, New Zealand, in central Otago on the South Island, which is where I'm lucky enough to have a house 50 miles from a World Heritage dark sky area that just blows you away. One thing I'd say about Berthoud is that getting the streetlights at 3,000 degrees Kelvin and using what they use in Cromwell as a light meter, if your neighbor's spilling too much light on your house, they can order it to come back down. Now, I'm here tonight in regards to Berthoud Main Street. And I'm fed up after 7 years that I was in this room offering to pay for the salary of a director. For 2 years, that was $39,000. And I put $7,000 into helping Karen Fate until she had to retire due to family illness. I went to Seattle to the National Convention of Main Street and spent another $3,000 or $4,000 in a week of my time in Seattle. When I came back from there, I had so much support out of Denver, they sent $9,000 worth of free consulting here to make sure that we were on track and moving forward. It was about this time that I got shown the door by a group of individuals who stepped in as Karen had left. And my wife at the time, who's since passed away, made a joke to me that I just wasn't appreciated. And that was clear when I tried to call into a board meeting in September of 2019 from my house in New Zealand. And I called the number I'd been given for an hour. And then finally, about 2 minutes before the end of the meeting, somebody answered the phone. And the meeting's over and my input's not needed. So that was it for me. Now, it's gone downhill. This organization, this Berthoud Main Street, as near as I can tell now, doesn't even exist. It's a website. May I ask how many of you on the town board are members of the board of directors of Berthoud Main Street?
No, sir, you may not. This is not a.
Okay, excuse me then. I think there's 2 of you, and I would make it incumbent on you to move forward with the alternative group of individuals in town, this Downtown Berthoud Mercantile organization, this collaborative. These people are motivated. They're getting things done. They're donating their time and their effort out of their own pockets. And it insults me knowing the benefit of Main Street, that tax money that we've already paid the federal government isn't coming back into this community to help small businesses achieve real success and to market ourselves outside of the immediate area of media, newspaper, whatever's available, and be more successful. So I would say have a private meeting among yourselves and decide that you're going to get together with this collaborative, with representatives from them, and you're going to figure out a way. And I talked to Gail Langley at the Denver office of Main Street yesterday. She will come up and help you fold the 2 organizations into one so that it can be a successful 28th community in Colorado. She started with 15, 27's about to come online. But she loves Berthoud for this. It's the right size for it to be tremendously successful. And for those of you who don't know, it's federal money comes down through the state to a local board of directors who then give it out to the local businesses based on locally perceived needs. It's genius.
Thank you, Mr. Guthrie.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And who is the,
Mr. Dubois there in the plaid?
good, thank you.
And for the record, yes, I am a member of the director there. We did reach out to the members of the collaborative. They were not interested, but that doesn't, it's not a moot point what you're saying, and we can always reach out again. Maybe they'll want to join. Okay, and Mrs. Tassie, we'll have a spot for you under the dark sky. So let's move on to the regular agenda tonight. We'll start off with consent. Does trustees like anything removed from consent? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve consent?
I'll make the move. Ugh, did my mouth. Motion to approve the consent agenda.
All right, trustee Hardy has moved. Is there a second? Trustee Albrecht has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote?
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Albrecht, Mayor Karsmack.
Yes. All right, consent has been approved. I'm pulling up here something next. Give me a second here. I gotta. That is supposed to go to a different Facebook group here. I had it open, ready to go. I apologize if it makes this noise again. There we go. All right, those not on the agenda tonight, we have a very special person in the audience tonight that has served the Berthoud community very well and for a good amount of time now, and I wanted to recognize her as a organization. And that is Ms. Andrea Maxwell, Deputy Andrea Maxwell. And so I'm just going to read this straight from the Sheriff's Office post. And it says, the Laramie County Sheriff's Office Deputy has been named the Colorado Cattlemen's Association Law Officer of the Year. Deputy Andrea Maxwell received this award at the association's recent mid-winter conference. In 2024, Maxwell gained significant recognition within the Laramie County agricultural community and Colorado Department of Agriculture for her work on several animal neglect and abuse cases. Ms. Maxwell, Deputy Maxwell, you mind coming to the front? I'm sorry, I should have said that at the beginning. We all got to take a look at you.
I really appreciate it. Are you done reading?
No, I'm halfway here. Here we go. Make sure we put all our eyes on you.
Oh, great.
In 2024, Maxwell gained significant recognition within the Laramie County agricultural community and Colorado Department of Agriculture for her work on several animal neglect and abuse cases. She collaborated with the Laramie County Brand Inspection Office, Colorado Brand Commissioner, and 8th Judicial District Attorney's Office to build strong cases that resulted in successful prosecution. Maxwell also helped establish partnerships with Colorado State University, whose veterinary diagnostic team assisted with in-field necropsies to support justice for victims in agricultural crimes. During the award presentation, Colorado Brand Commissioner Todd Ingley commended the dedication shown by Maxwell and encouraged other counties to adopt the agency's collaborative approach. And let's skip to the end here. It says Maxwell joined the Laramie County Sheriff's Office in 2018 and is currently assigned to the Berthoud Squad. And in addition to supporting public safety and engagement efforts, Maxwell is a certified equine investigator. With lifelong experience working with horses and livestock, she has a deep personal connection to the agricultural community. So with that, we wanted to read this. Certificate of Recognition. This certificate is hereby awarded to Andrea Maxwell in recognition of your outstanding dedication and service to the agricultural community and animal welfare. The town of Berthoud proudly acknowledges and appreciates your achievement as the Colorado Cattlemen's Association Law Officer of the Year Award recipient. So thank you for your dedication and service to the town and to the community.
Thank you,
Let's
sir.
give her-
I want to say something really quick. I've been getting, this is an awesome award that I was presented. I've been getting a lot of notoriety. I try to steer clear from the camera. It's happening right now. But really what I want you guys to know is there are 11 officers in the Berthoud squad, 9 deputies, 2 corporals, and 1 sergeant right here. And they are all amazing people, and they're all dedicated to making sure you go home safe every single night. So really, thank you for this, but I want more of the award to go out to just recognition of the people that are serving you guys and keeping you safe. So thank you.
Thank you. Very awesome. All right. Let's move on now to appointment to tree advisory committee. And Trustee Murphy and I served on that. Trustee Murphy, Mayor Pro Tem Murphy cannot be here tonight. So our initial interview, we did one interview and then we decided to extend it to allow 2 more applicants to interview, and that was conducted last night. Out of the 2 interviews, we found a really good match with one of the candidates, and that's Mr. Daniel Buendia. I hope I got the last name right. Appreciate all 3 of the candidates for interviewing with us. Mr. Buendia was just very knowledgeable about trees, works with them in a professional setting, and had a lot to say about developments in kind of drought tolerant or water restricted areas such as Berthoud, and the trees that he's tried to work on along with Metro District. So after we conducted that interview, we thought that he'd be a perfect match. Anyone have any questions with that? All right, so I guess I'll move to appoint Daniel Buendia to the Tree Advisory Committee for a term to expire September 30th, 2026. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Trustee Hardy is seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right.
Is he here?
I don't think, is Mr. Buendia here? I don't think he knows. We'll make sure he knows. We'll move on down to item number 3, and that's the after prom committee request. And we have the after prom committee here. Is that correct?
It's just me.
Hey, you are it.
I got volunteer.
Welcome. Thank you.
So I have to say my name and all
Please.
that fun
You don't have
stuff.
to say your address.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'm Jessica Patriquin, and I'm here on behalf of the After Prom Committee, which is composed of junior moms that volunteer at the high school. And we put on an event every year after prom. So like they have the prom for the high school, and then you would do an event. In previous years, we've had it at Grace Place at no cost to us. Unfortunately, this year it is on Easter weekend, so we don't get Grace Place this year. And so we put it out there to the students a couple weeks ago, and they all voted that they want it at the rec center. We've been working with Steve and Amanda at the rec center to come up with we had several questions for them. And they've come down to charging us as a nonprofit $1,694 plus a $500 deposit for the facility. And of course, it's just all donations as we put this event on for the kids. Like we provide food, activities, like prizes, and we do it until 1 in the morning. So we're renting the facility from 8:30 till 2 in the morning. The actual after prom event is from 10:30 till 1 in the morning. So it's a safe place for kids to go after the dance. So our ask as a committee is if the town can help supplement some of that cost from our funds that we have, because that money will come out of activities we'll have for the students to keep them there. It'll come out of food costs for us. So we're just asking as a town, because the students voted, they want it at the rec center opposed to the high school or anywhere else. So we're just asking that if the town would be able to help us a little bit, would
Oh,
be greatly
thank you very much.
appreciated. I just want to honor what the students want.
Yeah, thank you for
And be the voice
bringing
for
this
them.
up.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
actually, Trustee Albrecht brought this up, so
Yes.
thank you for, any questions for Ms. Patrick? Kind of answered mine. I did ours at the high school, so I was wondering, did they discontinue it? But turns out the students just didn't want to go there.
They spend all week there, and we're trying to provide like a different place for them. The school will allow us to have it there for free, but the students want it at the rec center. So I'm just trying to honor that for them, so.
For those of you who don't know, the after prom is such a big deal because it's keeping our kids off the streets essentially and giving them a safe alternative to going to parties or getting into trouble. And living in a small town, there's limited things they could do. So having something that's exciting and fun for them after prom is a safe space. And one of the things I thought is if Berthoud could just be a sponsor essentially of the event and provide that space for limited cost and just show that Berthoud is a partner with these great events that help keep our kids safe. It's kind of my thoughts.
I think the only maybe drawback is another nonprofit saying, well, they got it, why don't we? But I don't know how many other nonprofits need to go to 2 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah,
So the first request I heard was they were gonna charge $3,000, but now I'm hearing 1,500, so they
They
brought
wanted,
it down.
they wanted $3,000 if we use the pool. And so we nixed that idea of the pool, and so we're gonna use the gym, and then you guys have like a little meeting party room. And so we'll use those two areas. So, we're gonna do like a blow up, inflatables, cornhole is what they want. They want spike ball, basketball. That's what they, like, they voted and that's kind of what they want. And then we'll have a food in a different area and prizes. So we do like prizes. We have people donate like TVs, little mini fridges, stuff for their dorms, you know, gift cards, and then we give them away to the students. We raffle them off, and we do it throughout the night, keep them there and keep them active and going and feed them, and so that's what we do. I did this a couple years ago at Grace Place. So this is my second year. It's junior parents, so.
Certainly don't, it's my opinion, I certainly don't see any drawbacks, I guess. You could do 1,000 or 1,500. Administrator Kirk, do you have any comments?
It's not a direct cash donation, so it's staff time and operating the facility outside of normal hours. So if our rec team can provide the staffing, I don't see any issue with it. If that's something the board wants to do.
And is that 1,600 mainly just to cover staff time, or would that just be additional rental fees?
I think it's probably a combination of both. So we have an established rental schedule for for-profits, nonprofits, for the whole facility, the gym, the pool, and kind of breakdown. I haven't seen the breakdown. 3,000 sounds like a lot to me, but maybe that is what our normal facility rental might have been. But I would assume that we would also be trying to cover staff time because this would be well outside of normal working hours. So we're gonna have to pay a little extra and try and make sure that we have the right staff. The pool in particular would be kind of challenging getting lifeguards there, and a lot of our lifeguards are high school students, the vast majority actually. So, but again, I think if we can accommodate that with staffing, and it sounds like our rec team sounds like they may have figured that out, then, you know, again, it's not a direct cash donation, it's kind of a waiver of fees, which I don't see an issue with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts?
I think that's kind of cool, but I'd want the pool.
Would you want to request the pool, and then we can evaluate from there?
It's just, I would say no.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just letting that out.
just the liability, of that
Yeah.
is my thought. On your end and with having that many students there and our end, I just feel like huge liability, I think.
Just here, any thoughts?
I mean, I think if there's a safe place to gather the kids together, the fact that they want to be at the rec center is a positive remark on their behalf and on the town's behalf. You know, I'm concerned about the precedent, but I mean, I don't think it's that big of a deal. And, you know, obviously I just ask that they treat the staff well and clean up after themselves, but they seem.
So I'll have my own cleanup crew, so.
Okay. You want anything to add? You already kind of-
I feel like the cost is reasonable for keeping our kids safe. So if the cost is an issue, then maybe talk about staffing time and, you know, split that with them. But at this point, I feel like it's pretty nominal for the kids to be safe.
I agree. I think it is. Considering the alternatives, it's a very low cost. Well, I think we all support that. Administrator Kirk, is that all right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to connect to the rec team, just make sure that that's
Yeah,
all
sure,
squared away, but if you guys are okay with that, we'll figure it out.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
for
so
bringing this to
Steve's
us.
the one we're working with now, since Amanda passed it on to Steve, so that's what we're working with, so. Okay, great, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Good fun.
We couldn't have it anywhere but the high school.
Yeah, man.
Prom and after prom.
It's getting packed too. It's getting too full in there, I think, to do a lot.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Next is the 330 Mountain Avenue Historic Landmark. This is an alteration request, and we have our Community Development Director, Ann Johnson, here to present.
Good evening, Mayor Karspeck and members of the Town Board of Trustees. So what we have this evening is a presentation to illustrate the potential changes, should you approve them this evening, to locally designated landmark. This process is just a little bit different than our traditional land use process. We have the pre-application, application submittal. It goes to the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee. They are not a quasi-judicial board like Planning Commission is. They are just an advisory role. They also review major and minor alterations to historic landmarks, and then staff presents their recommendation to you, and you are the final decision maker. All right, so tonight, staff will make a presentation. If the applicant is here, they can make a presentation, and then you all will discuss and make a decision. So the definition of an alteration is on this slide. It's an addition, removal, change, or reconfiguration, which alters the exterior character of a local historic landmark, including new construction in historic districts. And it was determined that this was a major alteration proposal because they are including windows, new doors, changes to that facade. So that major alteration, again, requires that it comes forth to you all for a final decision. The location is 330 Mountain. It's on this slide. It's the property that's highlighted in blue. You might know this as the old Bertha Drug location. It's on the north side of Mountain. This is 3rd Street is on the left-hand side of the slide. 4th Street is on the right hand of the slide. This is a mirror image. So across the street from Subway, you have the dental office, and then you can see what's across the street from the buildings across the street from each other. The property that is circled in the yellow squoval there, that is the Bertha Drug site. You'll see the proposed changes do fit the historic context of that block face a lot better than the existing facade is today. This is the facade that is being proposed. You can see that the applicant did work with the museum in town, worked with Mark French, looked at photos, historic records of this building, and are replicating the door positions, window positions, even the projecting signage, some details in the cornice with the brickwork at the top. So staff felt as if this was an appropriate change, and then the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee also felt that this was an appropriate change. They did make some recommendations that adhere more closely to the Mountain Avenue overlay plan, as well as our architectural standards. They're very minor proposals that they're bringing to you this evening. So in the land use code, just like with any other change, any land use application, there are standards that have to be met. Rather than reading these standards to you on the slide or giving the rationale, what staff and then the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee found, those are in your packets, but if you have a question about any one of them, I'm happy to go into details, but we don't need to go into those details. So we'll just let the record show that 2 slides contain the standards that need to be met. And the 4 items that Historic Preservation Advisory Committee would like to see are no tinted windows. That is reflected in our land use code, to utilize red brick, to utilize any existing materials that might be found underneath that facade that was put up in the 70s. And if there is any brick bonding, that is like brick in railroad style is one way, and brick in other styles are another way. So if there's some brick patterns underneath that false facade, to try to replicate what was there, if that's possible. And then also any changes such as the tinting and utilizing of brick that you all decide to do, that they would just need to amend their building permit to be reflective of the decision and direction that you provide. So it's all fairly straightforward, and that concludes my presentation. And the only other item is that Historic Preservation Advisory Committee did send their recommendation to you for approval with these 4 items, and that is in your packet of materials.
Thank you. Trustees, any questions? Mind elaborating for me, number 4, just a little bit more. They're just wanting that to reflect in the building permit.
Oh, item number 4, yes, just that they can't proceed as they submitted to Historic Preservation Advisory Commission until after you all have provided your approval to go forth.
Okay. Ah, okay, that's it. Okay. Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions. Do you have the applicant here? Or?
I do not see the applicant present.
Okay. Well, then we'll just bring it back to the board here and have a discussion. Thank you very much. I think it's fantastic. Any thoughts?
No, it's great. It's gonna take it back.
Yeah, I think it looks good. In fact, I think one of the comments that was on one of the previous slides about making sure that false historical characteristics of the building are not given precedence to actual historical character of the building, I think is a good way to put that. And I think that the elevations that we got in the packet actually look closer to the original, what is it, like the 1915 and the 1920s. They look closer to that than the current status of the building anyway, so I think this is a good update. It looks, it makes everything more parallel to the south side of the road as well, so.
Just Albrecht, you.
I'm positively giddy about this. Honestly, this is so exciting, and I really have to commend staff and the applicant for the process, because I think it's the first time I've seen something go through historical preservation, get their eyes on it, and then just get everything back to the historic roots. These photographs, all of this going into maintaining our historic downtown is amazing. So thank you for the work on that, and I hope everyone takes a cue from this going forward. So I'm excited.
Trustee Hardy, you favor?
It's great.
Yeah.
It's gonna take it back from the 50s, 60s, 70s to present to back to the 1920s.
I agree. I don't know where I got this rumor that the Bertha drug location was always a pharmacy or a drugstore and that they never sold tobacco. And then we were looking at these photos in the packet and there's a giant Winslow sign on the front. And I think Winslow is a cigarette company.
No, Winslow was actually the pharmacist.
Oh, really? Winslow's a pharmacist. All right, never mind. So maybe there is hope or truth in that tobacco flavor. All right.
Thinking of Winston's?
Yeah, I think you're thinking of
Okay, I'm thinking of Winston's. Either way, this is a happy ending that there was no cigarettes there. If this isn't true, just keep the lie going, everyone. I agree. I think you, Trustee, you said it better than I could. This is, yeah. Very cool. All right, would anyone like to move on this?
I'll do it. I move to approve the request for a major alteration to the local historic landmark for the building facade at 330 Mountain Avenue, subject to the 4 conditions listed in the staff report.
Is there a second? All right, there's a motion by Trustee Ayers, seconded by Trustee Albrecht. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, this passes. Thank you very much, Director Johnson. We are moving on now to item number 5, and this is a dark sky update. We have Mr. Brian DuBois in the audience here to introduce this and all the hard work you've been doing.
Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. Thank you for your time tonight. As Mayor Karspeck said, I'm Brian DuBois. I'm the Economic Sustainability Manager. As you know, the town staff has been working over the last couple of years slowly to become the first dark sky certified community along the Front Range in Colorado. Made some significant steps. We've purchased some sky quality meters that are solar powered, so we don't have to go check them too often. Getting readings as part of our certification process, and has made great contributions to the town code to update our lighting ordinance. And then a few other things, working with Little Thompson Observatory, Mayor Karspeck, sitting through meetings to listen to me talk about this. And so recently town staff applied for a grant through the Colorado Tourism Office, and that we were awarded 70 hours of mentorship. And with that, I will introduce Mark Lauren, and he will tell you more about the process that we will go through for this mentorship.
Welcome, thanks for coming down tonight,
Thank you.
or all day, I should say, not just tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, trustees, thank you for your time, and thank you, Brian. And if you see a windblown look in my hair tonight, it's not a product that I'm using, it's because Brian and I were, and another man I'm gonna introduce you to, Pat O'Day, we're out doing an inventory of this building. And then we went over to the library and met Amy, which I'll talk about a little bit further, and we did an inventory of her building. So we are already on the process of some things that you go, what the heck is he talking about inventories? It will make sense in a few moments. So first of all, I just want to say my name is Mark Warren. I live at 285 Kestrel Lane in Silverthorne, Colorado. And I am a Colorado dark sky mentor. My job is to work with communities like Berthoud. I'm currently working with Frisco, Colorado right now, and to help them through a 6-month mentor process where I am helping them go through all the critical steps they need to do to apply for and achieve dark sky certification. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about. I'm going to explain to you what that process is. I'm going to explain to you the critical steps. I'll talk a little bit about what Brian and I have already been doing. I met with Mr. Mayor today and also with our town administrator and have a better sense of what we can do to make this happen for the town of Berthoud. So first and foremost, I may not look like I'm elated to be here, but I am. Because I want all of you to experience the dark sky and to experience awe. And what is awe? Awe is being confronted with something that causes you to question your current understanding of the world. Could be the birth of a child. Could be witnessing somebody getting married. It could be you getting married. Could be being part of one of your family members' death. It could be witnessing a communion. All of these things are part of what awe is. But for me as a stargazer, what I want is you to look up and experience awe. And our purpose in getting this certification for Berthoud as a dark sky community is so more people can experience that awe and have more fulfillment in their connection with the universe larger than them. Because like Carl Sagan said, we are all children of stardust. And I'll explain that to you more. So with that as an introduction, I'm going to take you through a little presentation that I have. Am I good to go here? I see a slide.
Yes, Mark, if you go ahead and advance to the next slide.
All right. Can I just use the arrows?
Yes.
There you go. All right. I'm old school that way.
And Mark, if you could, as you talk, face this way, our microphones are in the ceiling directly in front of you, so that'll help us pick up for the video as well.
I will do that, but I'm a wanderer, so if I wander, get me back into it. So here's what we're talking about tonight. We're going to look at the certification for the town of Berthoud, and let's get into what the agenda is all about. I've already introduced myself. I have taken the time to meet the mayor and the trustees prior to that. Again, thank you for your time. After that, I'm going to give you a real quick overview, and I'm glad you're back. I saw you walk out the room, but I'm glad you're back, because you're going to be a #1 champion of this in the town of Berthoud. And Brian, you're going to join Brian on the steering committee to help us pull this off. So I'm glad you're here. I'm going to give you my card so we can talk a little bit after this as well. So I'm always building a steering committee. Don't let me miss an opportunity when I hear enthusiasm from the community members. The other thing I'm going to talk about is at a very high level, what is the certification process? Then I'm going to dive into the elements. Elements are key things because what we have to do is kind of build a picture here. Then I'm going to talk about what has happened in terms of what Berthoud has told me, what's the deliverables they want from me, and then what are the metrics. Then I'm going to ask you what else I can do for you. And then we'll talk about the next steps in the process. So there we go. This is it right here. These are the elements of certification right here. And my brand new laser pointer doesn't work when you point to a screen. So let me just walk you through them. First of all, we're going to look at Brian right now is putting together a coalition for the stars. It's a steering committee that is going to guide this effort in the town of Berthoud. Be aware, this is not keyboard leadership steering committee type of stuff where you sit back and go, this is what I think we should do. You're gonna be out there working. It's a working, hands-on steering committee that's gonna help move this process forward, but also set the standards of where we want to go, where Berthoud wants to go as a community, as they become a dark sky community. Then the next thing we're already in the process of doing is conducting sky brightness measurement and recording that. Brian talked about his wireless dark sky readers from an organization called Udahedron. They're continuously reading the sky quality measurement right now. We take that data and then we build that into a database so that we can measure over time what Berthoud is doing to protect the night sky. This is a big thing. Where's my friend Amy? There she is. She's the champion of the day. When we were over meeting at the library today, we said, Amy, how can you help us engage the community with outreach and education? And all I had to do was put that in front of her, the connection, the sparks flew, and we got about 15, 20,000 different, I'm exaggerating. We have about 5 ideas of what we can do to build some community engagement. And let me tell you this right now, most important thing for protecting the dark skies and restoring the dark skies in Berthoud is to build awareness in the youth, okay? We have to get the children of tomorrow aware of their participation in preserving the dark sky. And I compliment Amy because she came up with some great ideas on how we can use storytelling, spring break, engagement ideas to help people understand dark skies and how we can preserve them. The next thing we're going to do is look at developing a light management plan. It's great to hear what Ann had to say, because I'm going to, Brian, as we're talking, we got to get Ann in this because she's going to be a critical lever in helping us get compliance with our standards that we have for preserving the dark sky here in Berthoud. Next thing we'll do is we'll set up a policy planning framework, and that's in relationship to the other elements. Sustainability is a key piece here for the city. How do we make sure that dark sky themes, principles, processes are embedded in all aspects of the town's policies and processes? How do we work with Excel? How do we work with other metro districts that are involved with the town? Then this is what we did today, that's why I have the wind-blown hair. We go out and we do an inventory, number 6, of all the town-owned or leased lighting. So as we were walking around the building, Brian said to me, I'm sure people are looking at us from the bank going, are they gonna rob us? Or what are they doing out there looking up at the lights? But we did the library today, we did this building, that's the start. So the inventory you're gonna see is the heavy lift of this whole project. Then we go ahead, we draft and we submit it, and then Dark Sky International is the one that makes the award. Let me tell you, this award is for perpetuity, all right? So every year, the town will have to send an update of what they have done to restore and preserve the dark skies of Berthoud. Now, you know this as well as I do. Light pollution is marching on. 80% of the people in the world have never seen the Milky Way. Well, why is that the case? What percentage of the population of the world lives in urban areas, right? I'll never forget, I was doing a dark sky event up at Keystone Science School. A young boy from the south side of Chicago, after he looked through my telescope, turned to me and he said, that's the first star I have ever seen. Broke my heart, okay? Let me also make another comment before I move on to the next slide. Light pollution is becoming so bad, what we call artificial light at night, the acronym is ALAN, okay, is becoming so bad that now we're just trying to maintain the deterioration of a night sky. Restoring it is going to be an even harder push, okay? And I want you to understand what Berthoud is going to provide people, because people say, well, Mark, what about all the other light pollution around us? What do we do with that? We don't do anything, because people look at what Berthoud's doing, Johnstown, Firestone, all these other places are going to say they are able to create an oasis of darkness that is going to help the residents of that community have better health. Why? Light pollution impacts your circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythms that are impacted over time ends up building amyloid plaque in the brain. Amyloid plaque, we know, is related to dementia and Alzheimer's, That's just you alone. We know that dark skies impact pollinators, our honeybees, right? They get confused when they see lights. It causes insects to become disoriented. Why are they circling the lights at night? It's not because they are wanting to be there, it's because they're disoriented. The next thing, wildlife. Most wildlife procreate and forage at night. They avoid light, so now they are not doing what they need to do. And then finally, bird migration. What do we know about bird migration? Is that birds are attracted to light. Colorado right here is a major northwest passageway for birds going from Canada down to Mexico. What happens? They get disoriented, they spin around, they get distracted, and they move towards the light. They get tired, they hit buildings, they go down and sit and rest. What happens when sometimes bird meet cat? Who wins that confrontation, right? So, and then finally, the last thing, as a stargazer, the only problem with stargazing is it takes place at night. But I can tell you some of the most personal, rewarding moments, joy I've ever experienced has been underneath a starry night. So health, pollinators, wildlife, and bird migration, and then stargazing all benefit from dark skies. So let's get into a little bit more. Very quickly, the purpose of the steering committee, these people are passionate. They want to have a town that has dark skies. We want business leaders, we want residents, we want elected officials to be a part of this team so that we have a long-term commitment to having the dark skies in Berthoud. You also want to communicate expectations. This is something that's Brian. Right now was put on the website today. So you are interested in being on the steering committee, go to the website, there's an application, there's a downloaded document that says this is what we expect of you. We're very clear on how much time it's going to take and what we expect of you. Steering committee will meet, and then and then already the town has applied and received the application approval to be in the pipeline. So that's the first part. Sky quality brightness measurement is really helping us understand what are we doing to protect the night sky. And then where are hot spots inside the town of Berthoud? Where do we need to work? Where is there more light being reflected up? These are done with handheld measurements, and as Brian mentioned, the continuous readers that are wireless. So every month or two, he goes out there, plugs in a thumb drive, downloads the data, sends it to me. I send it to the guy at Dark Sky International, and he crunches it for us. Okay, so then we have a database that shows what improvements we're making. Also use the sky quality measurement as a way to build outreach. We can use the Girl Scouts, we can use the Boy Scouts, we can use Scouts. I think we call them Scouts now, right? We can use the Scouts and teach them how to do the inventory as well as how to do the light measurement as a way to build their commitment and involvement. Again, addressing the younger generations. I'm going to move on to the next one right here. And this is the education and dark sky community outreach. Okay, so the goal is to spread the word, to build involvement and grow commitment to protect and restore the night sky. You probably got the idea already from me that hitting and addressing the youth and bringing them in is going to be the key to success. The other thing that I think is important is this is a groundswell of the local residents, the community. It's important that we use these engagement activities to show people what dark skies can do for you, not only in terms of your health, but your flowers, your plants. Then the other thing is you want to remember is that we want to enlist dark sky sites. We want to enlist the experts. We have the Little Thompson Observatory. We have the historic museum that has a telescope there. I know they have Friday night stargazing events and things like that. Let's make that connection with dark sky. The thing that Berthoud has going for them already that other communities don't have are these tremendous assets. You have the Little Thompson Observatory that's very involved. You have the historic museum that has the original telescope from the founder of the town. You have commitment already. You have the ability to use the library as a way to educate people, not only the youth, but adults. The whole idea is those existing assets have to be utilized, and that's not that hard to do. I compliment the town because you have these already. The next question is just how do we use them on a perpetuity basis twice a year as we do outreach events. We also want to get the chamber involved. I was talking to Mr. Mayor today about why don't we have a dark sky 5K race, okay? Give them headlights, let them sign up, let them run, and then afterwards they go to local businesses and they maybe get something that says, here's what we're doing at our business to protect the night sky. And then you get a little token, all right? You get a bunch of tokens, you go a spot, and maybe you get an ice cream or something like that. A way to build engagement. On the same time, maybe you could have the students in town do have an art show on the night sky. All these different ways to build engagement outside of stargazing, okay? Moving on to the next one, then we get into the lighting management plan, and this is where we're really looking at how do we have the dark sky philosophy and approach in all of our systems so that our plans meld and we are all pointing in the same direction. With lighting, getting the planning department in here with signage, that's the critical thing. Looking at other examples of light management plans from certified communities, that's the next step Brian and I are going to be taking, is comparing Ridgeway, Colorado, same population, to Berthoud. What could we pull from their already certified lighting ordinance and work it in, okay? The current ordinance that you have is top notch. I think it's just moving some pieces around and adding a couple other pieces into it as I've looked at it, all right? Moving on to the next, then we start up the policy planning. And this is kind of in the land management use code areas where you're looking at how do we protect the night skies by enlarging that circle, like Excel that provides us our lights, or other lights in town. If HOAs, or suppose we have an oil hobby horse put out with lights that's outside of town limits. How do we work with them to be able to align with our dark sky effort? So it's really engaging key partners and agencies to set up kind of a broader planning. How does that pay off? We start to extend the reach of the dark sky that Berthoud is creating, all right? Did I say it already? You are going to be able to tell people that Berthoud is a dark sky oasis on the Front Range where light pollution runs rampant, okay? Why? Because they never thought about controlling it, right? Why? Because we live in a society that believes more light is better, all right? I will propose to you from my own experience and others, you see better with less light. So that's another conversation. Moving on. Then we do the lighting inventory, which is what we've been talking about, and Brian and I have started today. And by the way, I want to introduce Mr. Pat O'Day right there at the end. Pat, if you could raise your hand, okay? Pat is a mentor in development. Pat is a resident of Berthoud. So you have in front of you right now somebody who lives here, who is learning what I'm doing, who's going to be able to support you on an ongoing basis. I'm sure that Pat would only ask for a reduction in his city taxes for helping out if that's some way of doing that, okay? But in all seriousness, what we're looking at and what Pat helped us today is we went around and we looked at all the lights, we looked at the fixture type, we looked at the lumens, the wattage, the color temperature, shielding, we looked at adaptive control. We found in this building lights that aren't even being used outside. This is all outside light that we're talking about, okay? We look at the sculpture in front, we're going, oh, we got to figure this one out. How do we illuminate the sculpture but not lighting the night sky, right? Let me put it to you this way, and I think this is important for people, especially in my friends in the police officers and the law enforcement. Dark skies does not mean dark ground. This is really important. We use light, we don't eliminate light, we just make light where it is necessary, where you need it, when you need it, in the right amount that you need it, okay? And I can imagine that our police department would tell us that probably the most ineffective light security is a light that's always on, because criminals look at that and say, well, nobody's there, the light's always on, but you and me, we get into a motion detector light, we walk into something and the light goes off and go, we hesitate even though we're not criminals. So motion detectors work. Adaptive controls is what we call those. And then the final thing that we're going to do as we started today is creating a database to track and show the progress that Berthoud is making, okay? Final, then we submit the application. I will help you with this as well. What will happen with the application is Dark Sky International wants you to be certified, okay? But I guarantee you they'll come back with some improvements, some additional information that they'll ask for from you, all right? And it's all in an element, just make sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed, okay? So after we get the certification, then we have to maintain it because this is a certification for perpetuity. So every year, you're gonna have to do 4 sky quality measurements. That's what Brian has already automated in motion right now. You have to do 2 outreach events a year, and then you just have to document the changes because this lighting inventory will show us where we need to improvement. So then over time, we're gonna slowly improve lights. We're gonna slowly replace lights with the right color temperature and the right lumens and the right shielding. And then finally, once you get that certification, then things start to really happen. But before we get to that, I want to just talk about some of the outcomes that the team has given us. And this comes from Brian, is one, help them develop the certification. They want to be the first certified community along the Front Range. That's what Berthoud wants. The driving goal, the ultimate goal. Number 2 is contribute to the development of Berthoud's unique stargazing attractions. You've heard me say it a number of times. I want you to have attractions that have to do with nightlife, that affects pollinators, birds, your health, and also with our insects and stargazing. This is not all about stargazing, all right? Then finally, we want to leverage our relationship with the Little Thompson. We want to talk about astrotourism opportunities. And then the final thing that Brian said, and even Mr. Mayor mentioned, is we want people to stay in Berthoud longer to experience the night sky they can't see in other Front Range cities. And I'm like, you got it. That is something that's going to get people right there, okay? More and more people are willing to travel and spend money to be under dark skies. Is that not true? Okay, so let's move on to the next. I'm so glad you're here because I got somebody who can help me with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide you some technical support, resources, advising, helping with the lighting inventory, making sure the ordinance is compliant and it does meet the standards on Dark Sky Colorado. Want to look at the dark sky long range plans and strategic documents, and then ongoing templates so that as new people come in, as you know, it sometimes happens, people leave their job, they move on to other opportunities. We got to be able to fill that job, fill that role, and have the tools and the templates and all the resources that people need to pick it up and keep it going. I even talked to I know Mr. Mayor today, and I believe I said it to the administrator, the head administrator, that we need to write this in the job description for somebody in the town so that it's formal and it's clearly a part of the town's process. The other thing I work with, communication and support, resource documents, training, and you know, all things are not equal. This is a Word document that I put up here in terms of a frequency of words that come up in terms of the certification process. The big word and the big heavy lift here is the lighting inventory. So if Berthoud said, we really want to hit the accelerator and we want to get this certification in a year, the only thing that holds you back is nature, because you have to have sky quality measurements for each season, one for each season. So if we were to put the accelerator in place right now and we say we want this done in a year, we want to be able to submit in a year, we already have one season of sky quality measurements in place. So then we would go through 4 more seasons. The seasons, winter, spring, autumn, and then, what is it? Winter, spring, summer, winter. So the point is, outside of that, that's the only thing that we are waiting for nature. We have to take the sky quality measurements. But if you take a look at the far right on this, the big heavy lift in red, that bar is the lighting inventory. So that's where we need the steering committee to help us identify volunteers as well as themselves who can come out and help us with this inventory. We need volunteers to help with the outreach events. We need volunteers to go to the outreach events, all right? We need volunteers to help spread the word. And that's part of the steering committee. So the steering committee is the second heaviest lift. Then you move to the third heaviest lift, which is in the middle, and that's kind of that salmon color. That's writing the lighting plan and then the ordinance. Once you get that, the things start to really get a little bit easier. The outreach events are always fun. The policy framework is just really kind of plugging in with what you have right now, and then the submission and sustaining of it. You know, we gotta talk truth, right? So what do we know as some of the truths that could possibly get in the barrier is the capacity. I made a very clear appeal to Mr. Mayor today that Brian needs more help to pull this off, okay? If we want to do this in a year. By the way, there's no timeline in having this certification achieved. Once you're in the pipeline, you have as much time as you need to achieve it. There's no, you have to do it in 5 years, right? Now, bear that in mind. So as long as you're making progress and taking activities, you can take 10, 15 years. Ridgway took 5, Paonia took 7 years to get theirs done. Why? There was some issues with the businesses, right? And lining and signage, all right? The other issue here is coordinating between multiple parties. Is, you know, we got volunteers, we've got internal organization, people don't return emails and phone calls. So getting that barrier, getting better coordination with the other resources that are gonna help make this happen. Then we have the communication between multiple parties. You ever remember that game telephone, right? So how do we avoid that? Because that's been a little bit of an issue, so.
Kind of story of the town is telephone.
Some success meters for you. We're doing the briefing tonight. That's gonna be done after that. We're gonna look, I even made a strong appeal to a couple of people today, but specifically to the mayor. He said, what can I do to help? Help me find people who are champions, advocates, and support the certification process. They wanna get involved. They're bleeding it from their heart. I see 2 people right there. Make sure you get their name, Brian. They're interested in joining you, okay? And then finally, the success outreach. We want at least 20 people at these outreach events. And then we want at least 50% of the town-owned light to be inventoried by the time of the mentoring process. 20% of the town's our compliant street lights are installed by the end of the year. I think we already got that one. We have 3 project committee team members meet. Then we assess at least 3. This is my favorite. I think you're gonna like this one, Carl, is that, Mr. Trustee, is the creating at least 3 dark sites designated locations where we have berthed designated dark sky sites with plaques. You go there, you hit a QR code, it tells you, if you look up, this is what you're seeing in the night sky, okay? Then finally, we're gonna look at getting the board ordinance approved and updated. I think it's mainly updating some of the plans there and then finally getting it submitted. So our next steps from here are Brian and I meet twice every other week for an hour. We're gonna orient the steering committee. We're gonna schedule 3 2-hour steering committee meetings between now and May 30th. Then we're gonna map and inventory the town's light. We're right on track. And then we've already done, here I am talking to you guys right now. So to wrap these things up, I just wanna make sure that the town understands that I think some of the things that we'll do is I'll create I'm working on the resolution. Thank you for reminding me of that, Mr. Mayor. We've spent some time talking about creating a town resolution, that this is a position that the trustees are supporting. It's a long-term commitment, and that this resolution will cross trustees going forward, all right? And then I've already sent the resolutions for comparison to Brian. We talked about job descriptions for the person who would take this on an ongoing basis. We talked about the outreach. Let's see, some of the things I'll just go through. I'll work with the steering committee. We've got the meetings, the point of contact for the inventory. And then last thing I want to talk about is utilizing all of the available mentor hours by May 31st. Okay, what that means is the Economic Development and International Trade Group of the state of Colorado gave money to the Colorado Tourism Office for this program, the mentor program. That then came to Dark Sky, Colorado, which then brings me to where you are at today for me to be speaking to you. I have 70 hours to support you between now and May 31st. After that, then we're gonna be working with our local mentor resident, who's gonna be continuing to be partnering with me to develop his skills as a mentor. And then Brian will help you, Pat will help you move this forward towards certification. Now, the other thing I also want you to know is I don't disappear on the 31st of May. I will be around to support you on an ongoing basis. I will come up when you do outreach events, and I look forward to that. So before I stop away, I have these questions for you. What do you want to know from me? What else can I do to help you? And then the question is this, all of you, you don't have to answer is, but what is your commitment to supporting the town of Berthoud achieving Dark Sky certification? That's not just the trustees, and I'm not gonna look down the line and point at all of you, but at every person in this room. What is your commitment to helping Berthoud achieve Dark Sky certification? So on that note, I will open it up to whatever questions you have for me.
Thank you. Trustees, questions?
Sure, so just out of curiosity, how much of light pollution can be controlled by behavior?
A lot. There is something every one of you can do tonight to contribute to protecting the night sky and eliminating light pollution. It's not gonna cost you a penny. You can start tonight. Here it is. Pull down your blinds. When you're in your house and you have your lights in by 10 o'clock at night, turn off your outside lights by 10 o'clock at night. This is the only form of pollution you can take immediate action on and see immediate results. Great question, thank you.
Any questions?
May, any for me? Trustee?
I think that was very thorough. You
Okay.
answered questions I didn't even think to ask, so thank you.
Well, I just would like to end by saying this, and first of all, go ahead, I'm sorry.
We also have Miss Tassie. I don't know if this ties in, but would you like to speak real quick before we wrap up? Yeah, please come to the front and then you might
Sure.
this might turn into some more questions or anything, but
Sure.
Miss Tassie has to speak on this.
Good evening, Mayor and trustees. I'm Leslie Tennessee. My address is 945 North 4th Street here in Berthoud. I had no idea this was going to happen. I just wrote this little brief thing. Didn't know it was going to tie in so well with what you've been talking about.
$5.
Okay, here's my little spiel. One of the worst and flagrantly indifferent perpetrators of light pollution is Berthoud's pride and joy, TPC. A friend of mine built a house in Hammond Farm Estates subdivision in 2018. They had an incredible view of the Rockies by day and the night sky after dark. Marring that view for 5 years has been the glaring lights from TPC, built in 2020 directly across Route 287 from them, as well as other homes along that side of Route 287. I can attest to the blinding glare of those lights, having spent evenings at my friend's home. Honestly, it's a travesty, a blight on the nighttime environment, and a huge hindrance to stargazers. My friend has done research on dark sky communities and is passionate about and supportive of reversing the negative effects of overuse of unnecessary lighting, especially as it occurs in the Berthoud community. However, she feels she is the solitary voice in speaking out against it. This is her quote. "I wish I could compare Berthoud today from 2018 before TPC put up those lights. Anything I've ever said at open mic here, meaning the town board meetings, just goes unnoticed. Just because TPC was built before they had light laws doesn't keep those lights from killing insects and polluting the night sky. They could dim them if they cared enough by updating the multitude of lamps over there. The lights are lit all night, and the glut of light bulbs is overkill. I've been the only person to speak out, it seems. The fact that the town is moving forward on their commitment to becoming a dark sky community is encouraging and exciting. My friend and I hope that when the goals are accomplished, that TBC will be responsible for adjusting their lighting situation to comply with the dark sky criteria. Thank you.
Thank you. Great time. Yeah. I just,
Mr. Mayor,
yes,
just
go
one
ahead.
last thing. if I may.
Absolutely.
If I may.
Absolutely.
I would like to give to the trustees, you're all looking for talking points, right? As far as how to talk about night skies. And here on the front, we talk about the shielding, but on the back side are the 5 principles of protecting the night sky. So when you go around and you talk to people and you say to yourself, or they say, why should I be interested in protecting the night sky? You now have talking points. Simple things to say, right light, right time, when you need it, right direction, okay? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, trustees, again, for your time. I truly appreciate it.
Really, real quick, one, thank you. It was really motivating to talk to you earlier today. And Brian too, thank you. Oh, you're behind the pillar. It's having you on board, Brian, and taking this over means this program is still alive. Truly, you've done all this, so thank you. And having you now on board, it just gave me so much hope. Nothing wrong with the last mentor, but having you here now is just like so much stability. And your presentation right now was more motivating than I could have ever expected. Instead of like a call to arms or something, it's like a call to telescope. I just want to get out there. So thank you. You did a fantastic job.
My pleasure.
One thing you brought up, so we were doing measurements early as last year, but we did measurements, but maybe didn't take pictures of the sky.
Mhm.
I just looked right now and we lucked out, but I was taking pictures of the sky at the same time. So I actually have
Perfect.
pictures on those days.
Perfect.
So we can go back to last spring as their starting point.
Okay, we're already pushing the seasons forward, so that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
You just made my evening right there. So,
Are you driving back to Silverthorne tonight?
I am going back down to Denver
Okay,
tonight.
well, that's still like.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I just would like to say this, one of the things that astronomers say to each other when we part company, we say, I wish you clear skies and starry regards. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. All right.
Can I just say, you coined a phrase, I think should be a bumper sticker.
What's that?
Call the telescope.
I call the stars.
Yep, let's do both.
Do we want to keep going or you want to take a break? Yeah, let's just roll right into this then. So we'll go on to the. Everybody wrapped, folks? Yeah, we got a couple in the back here.
Yeah.
Let's just go right on into our transit assessment priorities, their final item tonight, and second part of this, a follow-up to the start, which was at the last meeting, and I'll turn it over to Administrator Kirk.
Thank you, Mayor Karspeck. As you know, at the last meeting, we started a conversation about our transportation transit services here in town. It was partly driven by a request from RAF for additional funding and an opportunity to talk to the board about what does the future of transit look like in town, transit and transportation generally. As a follow-up to that meeting, we sent out a survey to the Board of Trustees to gather some initial feedback to try and color that next conversation. We did receive 3 surveys back from the 7 of you, and the feedback is a little bit varied, and so I don't know that it provides a lot of clarity or detail. I do think that perhaps the suggestion to form a committee may make some sense to try and tackle this issue in a different way. I think it's important that if we do that, that the board try to at least provide some direction and priorities about what problems that committee is going to focus on and what direction that committee should try to take. Unless the board would rather just have a kind of a more broader, open-ended research and recommendation kind of committee. There was some consistency in the few responses that we received in terms of what should be some of the kind of deciding factors for success with transit, and that is cost per rider and overall availability. And so, you know, I think if the goal for a committee was to evaluate our current transit service, and for clarity, and you know this, but for the public's benefit as well, the town's transit service is BATS, and RAFT is a separate entity that provides a service that is independent of the town, but also supported financially by the town where it fills some gaps in the town's service. But if the direction is, let's find the best ways to increase, or to decrease, excuse me, the cost per rider and to increase the availability of service to residents, that might be a good starting place for that discussion. And so with that as a little bit of background, you know, again, I think where from a staff standpoint, what we're looking for, and this I'll reiterate from our last meeting, is kind of a broader maybe direction from the town board about where do you want to focus time and energy from the town in terms of town staff, resources, money, all those things. In terms of what problems should we be focused on solving with our current transit and transportation services, that I think that there clearly appears to be some gaps in I think a desired future and what we're doing now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about our current service that maybe we didn't tackle last time. I would love to hear from the trustees, kind of what are your thoughts and priorities for kind of that desire? What does that exciting picture of a desired future look like when it comes to transit and transportation services in town?
Okay, thank you. We didn't have a separate, is there any raft? We have two folks here for that right now? Okay, great. Just want to make sure. And were you guys wishing to speak at all? Okay, all right, just listening in. Well, thank you. That was gonna be my question. Just put one of you guys in the hot seat. Anyone want to start? Trustee Ayers?
So yeah, I think the important or an important part of addressing a transportation system would be what is the goal for what people? Is it a broad system that is trying to provide the most number of rides to the most number of people? Or is it a targeted audience that has specific needs? Is it a flex system that could possibly address both of those things less quantitatively, I guess, than having a specific system, right? So what does that mean? Do I walk down to the corner and grab whatever kind of transit to go to certain routes? Is it I need to go here, a couple other people need to go here, so we can sort of pre-order that system to go a specific place? What are the time frames? So, because that's gonna change depending on the ridership, it's gonna change depending on the needs of the individual riders, right? Is it mornings and afternoons? Is it all day? Is it people running errands? Is it people going to appointments? That sort of thing. And I guess I've heard, maybe I'm incorrect, but I've heard spotty information about, I mean, there are specific parts of the population that are needing it for specific reasons, but I've also heard spotty complaints from other parts of the town about what they would use it for, and would they actually use it if it were available. And so I guess, Administrator Kirk, if that's the kind of feedback or response that you're looking for me tonight, that's kind of the questions that I have. What information do we have that we can kind of synthesize to make the most number of people use this system to the best ability that we could provide the system? And can we provide that system? And could we do more to provide a little bit extra or a lot more extra depending on the wants and the needs of people that may not have the ability to take public transit because we're not offering that service?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think from my perspective, what we are looking for is that kind of direction. Um, I think what we have today is a flex system in some ways. It is a poorly conceived flexible system in that RAFT provides currently service to a specific demographic and population, right? Seniors and adults with special needs. That is their clientele. And the town provides transportation services that are, in theory, open to anyone. Anybody under the age of 13 has to be accompanied by an adult, but otherwise, the service is available to anyone in town. The difference is that our service effectively, in nearly all cases, serves the same population and demographic as RAFT. And so we have this weird overlap. From the original transit assessment and from from staff's opinion and experience, the reason for that is that our system doesn't offer anything really different than what RAFT does. And maybe in some ways it's even less efficient. Because we don't do on-demand service at all. So everything has to be pre-scheduled, which limits the functionality, right? There's a reason why Uber and Lyft is so popular, are popular services, because you can schedule a ride and a car will pick you up in 10 or 15 minutes. We can't do that with our current staffing, vehicles, all those things, right? And so in order to expand our system into a broader, more available, more technologically driven system, we've applied for the microtransit pilot grant that we received and hopefully will eventually get.
That's gonna be my question. We're still waiting on that funding?
We are. We do need to get our MOU done with CDOT so that they can accept the money and some of those federal grant requirements on our behalf, so that they need to. We're not currently eligible to accept that kind of transit funding, and we'd have to go through a pretty rigorous process to do that. But CDOT can, and then kind of pass through the money to us, and they can handle some of the things that we're not currently equipped to do. It'll be a good setup for us, but we need to finalize that deal. We've been trying to work through that. CDOT's had a couple of staffing changes that have, as you can imagine, slow that process down. I think we are still on target to get this federal funding through the Congressionally Directed Spending Program, through the FTA. So I think that pilot program is still coming and can hopefully be underway before the end of the year. I think in worst case scenario, it should be done before the end of the year. So hopefully in best case scenario, it's sooner than that. But I guess in worst case scenario, we won't get the money at all. But I'm just gonna assume that's not gonna happen as an optimist. Nevertheless, I think in that case, we'll be providing a unique service that I think actually in the handful of responses that we received, some of the opportunities that were identified were more available service, which we would do, expanded hours in our current planned service model with microtransit. We talked about this a little bit last meeting. Expanded service hours, expanded service territory, so it would take you to Loveland and Longmont, which we only go to Loveland currently. It would be on demand, it would be technology driven through apps or software services with the additional ability for folks to call and schedule rides that don't have access to that technology. And so I think we'll hit a lot of the needs or the issues identified previously. That's why out of the transit assessment, microtransit was kind of the recommended next step, because it would deal with a lot of the issues that I think we currently see. I think what's happening though, and this is just as I've thought about this since the last meeting, I think what's happening is there's a question about what happens with RAFT and what happens with BATS in that scenario. And there's been discussion, like RAFT has expressed an interest to potentially be that microtransit provider. As you can imagine, that's a significant departure from their current mission. It would require staffing and vehicles and a whole bunch of stuff they don't currently have, but if they wanted to submit a proposal, we've expressed an interest for them to do that when we go out and solicit proposals at some point for this grant-funded project. But I think that's kind of what's driving a little bit of this, is like, how does that affect what we do currently? I don't think that from my perspective, it doesn't hinder what RAFT does, and if anything, it may even provide some additional support and direction, but I'm not really sure yet. how that will all play out. So that's a long way of saying, I think what we've been doing has been generally at the direction that we've all talked about as a community over the last, many years. And I think, one, we need to confirm that we're still going in the right direction, and that is the town is trying to expand transportation services to as many people as possible in town with expanded hours, better availability, broader service capability, technology, and all those things. Is that the direction that we want to continue to go, or should we be focusing more on a little more narrow focus, which is I think our current BATS clients or BATS riders, the majority of them would also qualify, and by the majority, I mean the significant majority of them also qualify for RAFT and probably use both services. And so we are providing a very overlapping service today. That's going to change with microtransit, but is that the right direction, or should we be modifying that direction and doing something different moving forward? And a lot of that comes back to exactly the questions you asked, which is what's the goal and for what people? Because I think the solutions become pretty clear if we know who are we trying to serve and under what conditions. We can figure that out pretty easily, I think.
Another, I guess, concern, question, comment I have is as the town has the possibility to become more populous, especially on an east-west, north-south axis, with the mobility hub on 25, with hopefully an increase in commercial out by 287, et cetera. Has there been an interest in having a, I don't know what to call it, but I guess a more traditional,
A fixed route service.
basically a fixed route service for people who live in the neighborhoods to come downtown for events, or to come downtown to go to Hayes or to the drugstore, right? That maybe live in one of the, not even necessarily outlying communities, but someone who doesn't want to necessarily get in their car to drive 3 minutes to find a parking spot, especially if there's an event going on or something like that. Or maybe they want to go to birthdays and parking is atrocious just because it just is, right? And I know there's special buses on those days, but is there an interest to make that a more regularized route, right? Maybe if I want to go to the rec center 3 times a week, I don't necessarily want to get in my car and drive. I know there's going to be a bus that's going to provide me with times that are not going to be too inconvenient to go down to the corner, catch a BATS or whatever, to the rec center, and then be able to get back on it when I'm done with whatever I'm doing and go back home.
We did evaluate fixed route transit service at a high level when we did the transit assessment. And fixed route is tough because it is highly resource intensive, but it doesn't always meet the needs of everybody, right? So if you have a fixed route, maybe the bus stop is 4 blocks away, right? Because we can't stop on every street and every corner. Maybe it's 5 or 6 blocks away. And once you've gotten to that, maybe you're only 4 blocks from downtown already, right? Because we're just not that big. And the cost to run fixed route service, multiple fixed routes, and perhaps we could do a single fixed route, but that would also take away from our ability to provide more scheduled ride services. Or we would increase our costs fairly significantly without, I think, expanding our service availability significantly. And so that's kind of why we ended up with microtransit. A lot of entities and agencies are kind of moving towards microtransit. The vehicles are smaller, they're less expensive to purchase, they're less expensive to operate. If you do it the right way, I think there's an opportunity for us to have some economies of scale with other agencies around us that are doing similar things, where we can potentially combine service providers who now, instead of having maybe 8 drivers that provide service over the course of a week, Now we have access to 25 or 26 because there's multiple agencies using the same firm or the same service. And so if somebody calls out sick, now it's easy for them to move resources around. You know, I think there is some economies of scale in transit. It's why it's tough to do really efficiently anywhere, but it's especially tough in a small town.
And my own 2 cents is that microtransit seems to be better in a town like this specifically because one of the biggest roadblocks to a successful fixed route system is and always is convenience.
100%.
Because if I can get in my car and drive 5 minutes, or if I can get on my bike and drive 5 minutes, or if I can call my friend and they can come pick me up, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to schedule my day around a bus that may only be able to come every hour because of the limitations of staffing. So I was just curious with the previous question, but to utilize the system, that on-demand type service, especially in a small town, seems the best way to go to me. However, I do think that the scale or the length of trips and the locations of the trips is one of the things that's handcuffing access to those services.
Yeah, and I think that's an important component of this conversation. So in addition to kind of the broader, kind of what's the goal and for what people, I do think that where do we go matters. And I think that's a big part of the conversation, even in the context of RAFT. You know, there have been, you know, we've had a lot of conversations with the RAFT over the last couple of years and very many more so recently. Do we want to take people to Greeley? Do we want to take people to Fort Collins? Is that the direction that we want to go? Or do we want to connect them to other services that can get them there? Or do we not even want to do that? I mean, I think there's a lot of that conversation that for me is still a little bit up in the air. We used to go to Longmont with BATS. We had one rider, and it just didn't make sense to kind of, and that was a consistent schedule. It was not, it never really changed. And so we just felt like the cost to take one person to Longmont just didn't make sense. But we did have a lot of folks that were going to Loveland on a fairly consistent basis. So we've maintained that service. But even that, you know, we have kind of a limit to where we'll go. But in a lot of ways, it's arbitrary, right? Like if you're going to go to First Street in Loveland, why not to 34? If you're going to go to 34, why not to 29th Street? And so in some ways, I think it's important that we define what our service boundary is. Otherwise, our service boundary is just everywhere. And we've mostly done that with BATS. But I think that's an important question that we need to answer as a community. Like if we're taking people out of town, how far are we willing to go?
Related question, how much would, and I apologize if you.
No, these are great.
How much could there be I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head, for like a fee schedule where if you wanted to be dropped off at another mobility hub to connect to services, that's a fee. Or if you want to be taken further or to a specific location that is sort of non-standard, okay, well, you have to pay the fee for that because you are utilizing the service more as like an Uber or Lyft or something like that, and less like a provided service. So kind of like I guess it would be a mix between a kind of fixed route and a kind of individualized travel plan.
During the transit assessment process, we interviewed several microtransit providers that operate in Colorado, 3 different ones. And I think that what we learned, what we heard consistently was you can structure the service however you want. You can charge it however you want. You can set up different rates at different times, different locations. You can charge one flat rate. You can charge nothing. You can define what your service territory is, and you can limit that very strictly, or you can leave that with more flexibility. And the system is designed to be able to adjust quickly, almost on the fly in some ways. And so I think a lot of that just comes down to what do we want to allow? You know, as a good example, like if somebody wanted to pay, okay, so maybe it's a $40 ride to go to the airport, right? That's probably about what you'd pay for an airport shuttle service. If somebody wants to do that, do we want to allow that? Maybe that's a reasonable cost, but it also takes a vehicle out of service for 2 hours. And that means nobody else can use that vehicle for 2 hours. And so does that really help us achieve the goal of getting people around town or getting people to kind of needed services? And I think the other, part of the other question is, I think in the microtransit context, there's no destination limitations, right? Like Raft talked about, we don't typically take people to the grocery store or to just run errands or, but we'll take you to doctor's appointments and, those kinds of things, kind of critical destinations. I don't know, but I don't think we want to limit destinations necessarily. And so if it's within that service territory that we establish, if it's a transit hub or a doctor's office or the grocery store or any other place, you could schedule a ride and take it. And so that expands that opportunity pretty significantly and expands the potential for ridership than if we limit destinations.
So we could, in whatever policy might get set up, we could signify that, I guess, so, just to use random terminology, but like basic necessities are covered or basic necessities are provided. Transit to basic necessities like a grocery store or a doctor's appointment or something like that is provided. But if you want to go to the baseball game, that's not really provided, or it's an extra fee, or maybe it's a specific bus that is running and you have to make sure that there's enough riders on the bus to schedule the bus or something like that. Is that a policy decision?
I think the answer to that is probably yes. I think, we could do all of those things. I can foresee a lot of challenges with doing that, but I think the answer is yes. It's really just a policy and direction decision. What service does the board want to provide? Where do we want to go and who do we want to serve? I think those are the real questions that we're trying to nail down so that we can provide the best possible solution to those priorities.
So I have some thoughts to maybe help give us some direction. I think that it was important we had the study, it was important we heard from Raft, it was important we applied for the grant as kind of the overarching goals of transit for the future of Berthoud. I think what I'm seeing now is that there are specific puzzle pieces that they don't all go together. There's different needs, different uses, different resources, probably for every need that we can address in that transit study. And so I think if we try to tackle this as one solution to all problems, we're going to keep hitting different obstacles and we're not going to be really resolving some key things. But what we do know is that there's a current service that's maxing out its ability because of the need and the demand. So the other needs are probably down the road, like people needing access to the mobility hub or, rides across town. Those are maybe not as high demand for us in the near future, but we do have a current need that's overgrown its ability and it's maximized. And so we do know there's a need for seniors and those with disabilities to get to appointments or necessities like you were saying. And so for me, I would like us to have perhaps break it down into bits and pieces and tackle it as the need comes online. And when we get to the microtransit grant, I think that will appeal to a different type of demographic or need or demand in Berthoud than what BATS and Raft is serving. And so I'd like to utilize, there's the fact that Raft exists is because of the need, and they rose up to meet it, the community did. And so I think it would behoove us to work with them and create some type of plan that they can continue to meet that growing need without it depleting continuous resources from the town. So it needs to be some type of partnership where it's sustainable with the resources we have. And obviously, like you said, there's overlap with the two different services we currently have. I would suggest we have a work study session with the board, have everyone finish the survey, because I think those questions were really helpful. and then work with Raft to construct what the model is for meeting that user group and addressing those needs more quickly. And then I have so many, as you were talking about the different ideas, I mean, there's so many cool ideas I have for downtown. Like we could have a trolley that goes up and down Berthoud, and that could be a quaint way to have a transit downtown, you know, something like that, or have, you know, rentable scooters, or you can,
Golf carts.
you know, maybe golf carts. Maybe we have a golf cart, you know, pathway through town that's safe for people to take, right? Those are cool things I think we could brainstorm and would be used, and as we develop tourism and downtown business, I think it's nice to have those things in the back of our mind, but maybe it's not as pressing as what we're kind of seeing from the seniors and those who need to get to some critical things. And I heard what they said when they also said, you know, a lot of these groups are wanting additional things like to go to events and stuff. And I think that's something Berthoud could come alongside if we could navigate just moving resources so it's more sustainable financially, and the access that Raft has to resources would be more sustainable for them. But they already exist. They've done the great work. I'd really like to work with them on what the model would be for them to continue that service, and then we could focus perhaps on some additional efforts. Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
Kind of
no,
breaking it
like
down.
make sure that whatever is being done now is covered plus, so that there's no fear of not being covered.
Yeah.
And then from there, we can move in different directions if we decide to, depending on community feedback or needs that might develop that we didn't even know existed.
Just continue
Good
adding
summary.
those puzzle pieces in essentially.
Hmm.
That's kind of my thoughts.
And so, oh, I'm sorry. So just for clarity, it sounds like what I'm hearing is maybe we just need to dive in more with Raft and understand what service they're providing for town residents, and maybe make sure that those needs are being met and expand that service. Is that?
And yeah, to find the model that the town can support, and I don't know if that means they incorporate with town or that we have some sort of advisory with their staff on how the finances are used. I mean, that's kind of, I'm not trying to get into the weeds, but I do think we need a model that's sustainable for the town and Raft for us to work together so that there's oversight and funding, but we're also getting feedback from their users too on how the system is working for them. And, you know, I think their presentation was really thorough on the demand that they're getting and frequency of use. And so I think it's there. It's just how do we utilize that more fully? And I would obviously incorporate BATS and Raft should have always probably kind of worked a little bit more in tandem. And now I think they should be one and the same. So a work study session, I think, with the board and staff on what's the model moving forward with a nonprofit that's essentially leading the charge in that, but you know, we're coming alongside and providing some oversight so that the funds are utilized appropriately and the users are happy and that whole group of our community is well serviced. Does that kind of clarify?
I think so.
Trustee Hardy?
My thought, I've been trying to come up with something that makes sense. It's kind of rolling around my head. But the bottom line is money. Funding is what's going to make this all work. The next thing is communication. I think we've got good communication between the two organizations, but I think it could be better. I think we need to somehow do a little bit more meshing. The other thing that I recall having some conversations with Ruth about was software and booking rides so that we were more efficient in meeting the needs of the ridership so that they had appropriate number of drivers, appropriate number of cars for those drivers, and then being able to make it easy enough so that their ridership could book a trip, whether it be calling it in old school or texting it in or even getting on a website. And I remember talking to her about Avaya out of Boulder, trying to sign into their software. I think, didn't Raft buy their own software, I think?
Yeah, they expensed it.
Yeah, they expense out their own software. So that's kind of where software is another key component in this whole thing, because it's not so much communication between the two groups, but it's communication with the community and how they want to choose their ridership. So maybe if we could find some sort of joint funded by one seat rather than by two seats, why should we buy two seats to service transportation in town when we could buy one seat of software? Yeah, I don't know if that's how it works, but That's just what I know from software, but somehow incorporate the whole thing so that they can go, well, I need a ride, and then there's a dispatcher process in that, I'm sure, somehow that could determine whether it's a raft ride or a bats ride, and if it's a free ride, or if it's a small fare fee for a teenager, or if it's a grocery store trip, it costs more, if it's further distance, it costs more, or if it's just, I don't know. Like you said, it's the software scalable. You can make it free, some charge, no charge, a lot of charge. But if we could somehow pool the money so that we're both benefiting and growing this together, because right now I almost kind of feel like Raft is growing faster than Bats is. And I don't know if that's just because we don't have a committee or a staff that's, you know, like a board, they have a whole board that's running this whole thing. I don't know how many people we've got working on town staff that run it. Thought it was just one person, but it might be more.
We have a transit supervisor, a driver, and a manager who oversees it all.
So, and then I don't know what the liability issues are, if there's, you know, if Raft has a need for a bus like the town has, if there's ways that they could schedule or get one of their drivers to maybe help with staffing issues on the BATS bus, so that, you know, there's some collaboration there to keep those vehicles running. I don't know if towns looked at smaller vehicles. I know those bigger vehicles are probably more expensive to operate than a smaller car. Maybe the town should look at getting a small car that's wheelchair accessible like Raft has, or maybe a smaller Sprinter van. It's a little bit more fuel economy, maybe get something that's electric or what is it, natural gas powered. Something that's along those fuel efficient lines. That's a little cheaper to run, so we can get our ridership costs down, because, you know, if you're driving a big bus and you only got one person on it, that's a pretty expensive ride for just one person, but get them in a fuel efficient car, it lowers that cost per rider. And again, I think with any sort of business, the cost per rider is going to go down when you get volume. The more ridership we get, the more demand we get. I think we can get that ridership cost down as well.
Well, I think some of that comes back to what service we provide, right?
Yeah.
I think Raft articulated, you know, their cost per ride is actually more than ours, despite the fact they use other people's
they're
vehicles and
going further
volunteers,
distance.
but they're going much farther distance. So I think when we talk about cost per ride, there's a lot that goes into
Maybe
that,
call it cost
right?
per mile.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Yeah, I think
we need to figure
cost per mile may be a different kind of metric. So, you know, I think a lot of that comes back to who are we trying to serve, where are we trying to take them, and when are we trying to do that?
Yeah.
I think that those three, if we answer those three questions, again, I think most of the, how we do that, I think there's different ways we can do that still, right? There's not one solution to every problem, but I think that those solutions become a lot more clear if we can really clearly define who are we trying to serve, where are we trying to, you know, who are we trying to give rides to, where are we trying to take them, and when are we trying to do that? Those three things
Well,
have a
Raft has
significant
operated
impact on
pretty
the cost per
nicely
ride.
as itself, and then Raft came in because there was a need that needed to be met that Bass wasn't doing. Now together, I think we're meeting more needs, but with two different systems. So how can we take this to the next level collaboratively in a way that Raft can still do what they're doing, that they're doing really well, and then Bats can do what it's been doing but really well, but then again, get that foundation of the transportation software, whatever the grant that we've got, that maybe we could help grow both of them equally, keep them both going, and somehow
And again, I think,
make that all work together collaboratively.
and I think a lot of that, again, comes back to who are we trying to serve, because like, if, let's say, you know, this is our thought process from a town staff perspective, so take it for what it's worth. Like, we've talked about, like, maybe we should just contract with Raft to provide all of our service. Like, the BATS doesn't really exist except in the way that we contract with Raft, similar to how we contract with the sheriff's department, right? They provide 100% of our policing services. We don't try to provide policing services during the day and the sheriff at night, right? Which is kind of how we operate with BATS, except that Raft's clientele base or their mission is adults and seniors with disabilities or special needs. So if we hired them completely, then we would miss out on all the other folks that may choose to ride the service. We do have other folks that are not seniors or adults with special needs that ride BATS. or they have to change their mission to expand their service to anyone and everyone, right? And so I think that's part of that question is like, which gaps are we trying to fill, who are we trying to serve, where are we trying to take them, and when?
Well, I think RTD kind of addressed this a little bit, because I remember when my mom lived down in Denver, I spotted RTT minivans that were made especially for kind of what Raft is doing. Getting that door-to-door service for their ridership that they weren't meeting by having the big buses on standard routes. I don't know if RTD still does that down there with companies like Avaya and things like that now, but I do recall seeing like a door-to-door type van service that RTD was running to get people from door to door or from areas that weren't being serviced by RTD to routes that were being serviced by them. So,
Yeah, they have like a dial ride program.
And that's basically microtransit, right? So we went down toward Lone Tree's microtransit service, and it's minivans, door to door. You schedule through a software service, picks you up, takes you where you want to go. The difference between it and Uber is that it's not guaranteed to be your car, right? So if the service gets a ride from somebody else, it can route that minivan to pick up a second passenger and take them both to where they need to go, or a third, or a fourth, or a fifth. And they have accessible minivans as well for folks that need wheelchair accessibility and other things. So I think what you're describing is basically microtransit.
Ms. Gilbert?
Yeah.
I was just gonna ask you what you thought about, as you're describing, them coming together, working together. I was curious if you thought, if it's doable that Raft is, assume the clientele that that's a servicing that is crossed over a similar group of people. And then anyone that's not serviced, like anyone who's not in the senior or disability group, would that's the next stage of our microtransit or additional transit needs, instead of, since it seems like the BATS model is costing a certain amount of money and Raft is volunteer led, and there's kind of more generation of support that they have for their own system. Could they absorb the BATS program? And then we, as a town, could we focus on, just a different style of transit? Kind of, you're saying like more economical vehicles. That's kind of just how my brain is compartmentalizing it. Is like kind of how Administrator Kirk was saying, is that maybe almost like a contract base. But it's also important that the cost is low to that group of people, which is why I like the model that Raft has set up, is that they can ride for free if needed or a minimal cost.
and that's where that
Whereas other
software comes
people
into
like
play.
you and I, if we wanna go, jump on something and go to DIA and, we could, afford to pay that maybe, or, there's the need is a little different. So do you think that would be, are we at that point where we could see them absorbing that?
Because that's kind of where with the cost sort of thing. Right now, Raft is not charging anything at all, I don't think. It's all free.
Donation-based?
It's all donation based, as we
They say
understand.
with BATS, BATS doesn't really have, isn't it mostly donation based too?
No,
Or sort of flat?
seniors are free, but it's $1 a ride, or it's $4 if you go out of town, I think. I can't
Yeah,
remember off the top of
so
my
there's
head.
a small fee, which
There's a
is
small
really
fee, but
minimal.
Our
cost.
fare box revenue is in total less than $3,000 a year, so
Yeah,
it's
but we
not,
get
it's
the
not a lot.
microtransit type booking system in there. They can go in there and clarify who they are and be like, oh, well, that's a 15-year-old kid that wants to go down to the bowling alley over in Windsor. That's gonna be a $10 ride, so.
Well, and that's,
or something, I don't know, round trip. But-
that's an interesting question, right? Like, do we wanna go to Windsor? I
Mhm.
mean, I think,
But then, that's the
do we
other
wanna
thing, is
take
like,
people to Shields, in Johnstown? Do we want, you know what I mean? I think that's a really important component of this conversation.
do we wanna become the Amazon of transporting people?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, like, can I suggest that, like, if we have a Raft service that's providing needs for that group of people, that group of people could have, they could go to their board of directors and make those appeals to where they wanna go in general. And then we can appease that to the best of our abilities within reason, and, if it's not cost prohibitive. But it'd be nice to have that directed there instead of us trying to figure out where it should go or not go, but have them essentially have a group of people that represents them and their needs. And say, hey, they really would love to go to Shields once a month or something. And we figure out negotiate the cost and how we meet that need, instead of us trying to figure out where they should go and how.
Mhm.
Let them advocate that for themselves.
Yeah, because the thing that we've also got something else here that we're kind of competing with and getting our startup going And that's things like Uber and Lyft and Zip. Is it Zip? What's the gray little station wagon thingies? You know, they're door-to-door type app services. And
And I think that's separate, because I think that's for the general
but
public,
you know,
right?
do they come to Berthoud though? That's the thing. It's like I'm sure some of them do if they're in the area, if they're available. But
Sure, yeah. I used to
You
drive.
can schedule an Uber ride here in Berthoud
Yeah.
right now.
I've never tried, so that's why.
I picked up a lady at the trailer park and took her right to, my inappropriate conversation. She took her 1 block to a bar, so, yeah, you could definitely do that.
So that service,
Whatever, you around town.
that service is available. It's interesting too, you know, I think, one of the things we've struggled with is, so Bats took somebody to Wendy's the other day in, South Loveland. And you know, if you think about our average cost per ride is $36, which is expensive, right? I
Did they
think
buy
we
the
can, I think we
driver's
can all
license?
agree that is an expensive cost. We could have just had their food delivered by DoorDash for like $6. And so, that doesn't really make sense in a lot of contexts. Now, if you have a ton of riders and your cost per ride comes down substantially, then maybe it doesn't really matter where you go, right? But there are times when, you know, when we look at the BATS reports and the destinations that we go, we think, we could have done this in other ways for a lot less money.
Yeah.
Now, in a lot of cases, I think, this is my sense of it and based on some anecdotes, in a lot of cases, folks just want to get out of the house, right? Especially when we're talking about seniors or adults with special needs, like they don't want to have their food delivered in because they want to get out, and I get that. But I think those are questions that we should consider when we think about how do we structure this kind of service to add the most value and kind of bang for your buck for
Yep.
taxpayers and for the folks that utilize the service.
Have the bus set up so like Tuesdays we go to Wendy's, Wednesday we go to KFC for their $5.99
I got-
fried steak. But
Yeah.
I got some thoughts. One, we have 2 RAFT members here, or RAFT members here. I think it is appropriate that we sit down and are all on the same, literally all on the same level, like we did with our first transit assessment or transit summit. So my thoughts are, we bring in the Laramie County facilitators, they're free, they're a disinterested third party, and we work on a survey with them that would go out to both the board and to RAFT members, so we see what we all are thinking. I almost don't want to jade it with my thoughts, but I really think we should be bold, or I would like to see at least one option where we do divest this, and RAFT does either take control, or we look at a third organization. I don't like if I was a new member to Berthoud and the name RAFT just wouldn't make sense for all sorts of transit rides, rural alternative for transportation. It's almost like the name BATS would make more sense. But I think there's just so much expertise and experience on the RAFT end, plus money we've not only donated to them, but they've got on their own with their Spedsta software. It just makes sense to me that we do some type of combination versus we do mobility for everyone else besides seniors and the disabled. I think it just makes sense to have it all in one hub. And maybe even if they are 2 separate entities, it looks like one on a website. So you can go to one site, you pay on one site, and you book on one site, and maybe someone behind the scenes is differentiating what organization. In my opinion, this whole thing has been extremely bold and ahead of its time since the 90s. Every step of the way, Berthoud's been ahead of the game. And it's been a little lethargic recently, but I think that's no reason not to step it up again. And I think the first way we could do this is really to just get literally on the same level here, and have that second transportation summit with, and I'm not saying you were an excellent facilitator, but I'm just saying have a third party so we can all just represent our own sides. To me, that would be a good way to start. And I think the first thing in that summit we should be doing is just reviewing the transit assessment we did, because that was really fantastic. And that addressed things like routes and why we're doing different directions. And staff did a really bold move off of that. You guys applied for that microtransit grant because of the assessment. So we're just following along what that assessment did. Things like the mobility hub, I think we should be jumping on. I was trying to use it the other day and I missed the bus, but man, if there was we could just do a simple pilot right now, throw out some advertisement. Hey, we're gonna stop at Taco Bell, and then we're gonna stop at Town Park or Fibble Park, and then we're gonna go to the mobility hub try that 3 times in the morning with the 3 different buses and just see what we get. I don't see much of a downside to that, maybe a little more staffing. But no, I digress. I think back to the main thing here is I think it really needs to start with another summit versus, it's hard for me to have 4 trustees here. We don't even have the other 3. And then talk about raft without them having a real ability to speak, kind of on different levels here. That's just my thoughts.
Would, in the original transit summit that we had back in, maybe that was, 2019?
Yeah, it was 2019,
I think it was pre-COVID, so I think that's right. We had a lot of transit providers there, and we had representatives from the MPO and VIA and lots of other services. Would you envision the same thing, or is this more of a raft and bats kind of conversation?
In my opinion, yeah, shoot. I forgot we had to
I'm just curious, but yeah.
Anyone that has any knowledge on transit, to me, would make sense to bring. I don't know.
I'm not in agreement, just
Okay.
I'm not trying to disrespect you at
No.
all, just because I think we're gonna go around this giant mountain over and over because it's a bigger bite than we can chew. I think we have to take the smaller bite and saying, how do we address seniors and those with disabilities right now with what the resources we have, and then let's tackle these other topics down the road. Like, we've done the big study, we've had the conversations, and we can't address all of it with our current resources right now. And even with resources coming online, I don't think we're gonna address it. And I think what's gonna happen is the raft organization is gonna continually get pushed on the back burner and not get the resources they need right now to address current needs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, Steve's presentation was about them looking into opportunities to provide rides to others than just seniors and disabled. So I think this does fall in line with some of their, I don't know the whole board's intent, but some of their ideas of increasing their services or their demographics. If we're just looking at the most need right now, I didn't take the survey that we did as we're looking at the most need. Absolutely, that would be seniors and the disabled. If we're talking about just that, I think, yeah, if RAF's behind on that, or I guess to me that would come back to having one software or one point of contact versus having 2.
As either side,
But the survey we took wasn't that. That was kind of looking at all aspects. So I think that's where
It was
some of
definitely intended to be broader than that.
Yeah.
One of the questions we did ask was, what do you think is the primary purpose of the transit service? And 2 out of the 3 that responded at least said provide mobilities for seniors and adults with special needs is the primary purpose.
I know some of those questions were broken up, because sometimes it's like I want to answer it based on what I know about raft and what I know about bats. It's just like, oh, I can't answer this the way I want to, because
Well,
they're 2 different things.
admittedly, I had structured the questions that way on purpose,
Okay.
because I was trying to get you to think not about bats and raft, but just about transit and transportation in general.
I noticed that.
So that's how I try to answer.
So I was trying to disassociate the raft and bats conversation, just try to gather some broader feedback about.
So if this is just the
Where are your
disabled, would you
priorities?
be opposed to still having a summit? Just so we can all talk, because right now there's just 4 of us and no rap. So us to me, it just seems kind of weird for me to make decisions.
I would definitely like a study session or works group with the board, staff, and RAFT.
Good.
And their board.
And their board, yes.
Yeah, okay, I think we're
Yes.
talking the same
I
thing
think
then.
that would be more, we'll have more, we can accomplish more with that. And the conversation will be more focused instead of going around the mountain. And then, like I said, we could tackle the other things as.
Are there
as
like
we go.
consultant experts that are like super? They
Who
can
do
come
we use,
in.
FHU?
It depends. Yeah, I mean, FHU is a transportation planning firm. They do a lot of stuff, but that's one of their primary focuses. They have a lot of experience helping develop and structure and restructure transit and transportation services all over the country. That's why we hired them to help us with the assessment. So there are some folks that I think serve in that kind of what I would call expert capacity. They can provide a lot of background and detail about how it works in other places and kind of what are some best practices they've seen that have been implemented in other places. That's why we hired them to begin with, yeah. I mean, sometimes, the definition of an expert is anybody that lives more than 20 miles away. In this case, I think there are some legitimate, folks that this is what they do. They specialize in transportation consulting and trying to provide that broader context of here's how it works best in their opinion based on all the experience, education,
They come in, stir the pot,
expertise they have.
look at what we've got.
Yeah,
go, wow, you've got 7 out of the 10 things met here. Here's how you can finish the other 3 things. And if you want to take it to this level, here's 5 more things you could do.
Yep. And so we could have somebody like that help us facilitate, or we could start broader with somebody like Larimer County to help facilitate that conversation. Their facilitation team, who are really good. They did a great job in the summit we had back in, pretty sure it was 2019. You know, and have them help us define a set of criteria together as a group. And then if we need some expert consultant help to figure out how to best make that happen, we could go out and find them and get that expertise. I think that could work too. So I think the quickest and easiest thing to do is probably to, and I don't mean that in like a let's just do the quickest and easiest thing, but I think the most efficient way to
Keep the ball rolling.
to go forward and keep the ball rolling is probably to have a dedicated study session with a third-party facilitator like the Larimer County Facilitation Team to bring the two entities together to talk about what I think continues to kind of surface as the primary driver of the conversation today, which is adults, seniors with special needs, and making sure that we're filling those gaps currently with the services that we have. And then unless the board tells us not to do microtransit, we're gonna kind of expand our service pretty significantly for at least a year as part of that pilot program to everyone in town, whenever you wanna get picked up within a reasonable set of criteria, right? Like we'll probably run during much more expanded hours than what BATS does today, but not like 24/7.
Yeah.
I think we'll see how that process goes in this other category too.
I think that's really important how we handle that, because that's $800,000, and I don't know who we use. I hope RAP puts out a proposal for that.
We'll have to solicit proposals. We'll
Yeah,
have to
and
do
I
some
imagine
kind
some of that money
competitive
is gonna be
selection
for
process.
purchasing equipment.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that we use someone local in case, even if the program fails, whoever's left with a bunch of vans could still use them.
And we would expect that they would either purchase or lease. So like the microtransit providers we talked to said we lease vehicles because it's better business value for them. And in a lot of cases they have vehicles all over the country. Most of these operators are not just operating locally, so they'll just absorb vehicles into their fleet if it doesn't work out, and they don't continue to provide that service here. So, but you're right. If we were going to expand somebody's service with physical assets that weren't going to go away, it would make a lot more sense to do that locally. I think I could see, I definitely see the logic in that. So
I want it to absolutely succeed, but if the upkeep's an additional $500,000 a year or something, maybe it can't survive. Well, at least RAF would be left with a bunch of fans or something else, or we would.
yeah.
Okay, well, I think all that, I appreciate Trustee Albrecht, you kind of narrowing that. Either way, this sounds like a good start. I like that proposal you just gave. Again, you're a fantastic facilitator. I just think having someone outside would allow us all to kind of focus in our area.
Well, and I'd love to participate in the conversation,
Absolutely.
not as a facilitator.
Yeah, and I think it would, for that kind of meeting and that kind of conversation, I think it would be really important to make sure that we get similar sized information from similar sized towns, but also similar sized towns in similar situations than us. Since we are in between Loveland and Longmont, but also on a broader spectrum, we're in between Fort Collins and Boulder and Denver. We're next to many, we're next to I-25, we're next to Highway 287, Highway 56 goes to Greeley, right? So we are kind of in the middle of these other entities that have either regional or microtransit or fixed routes. And so what is, as Administrator Kirk was saying, what are best practices? But I think it's important to make sure that we're looking at best practices for towns of our need and our necessities and our future growth, so that we're not comparing, well, this worked in Boulder, or this worked in Fort Collins, or this worked in so-and-so. But also at the same time, well, this worked in random random town in eastern Colorado that is not next to any other transit system, that is not next to any other thoroughfare, because we are kind of in a unique position being on the Front Range and the size that we are, that we have access to a lot of these amenities that many other towns that are our size don't have.
Like a little transportation desert, we're so close
Right,
to these other things, but we're not connected.
right. So we're close enough to possibly utilize or piggyback on these other systems,
It's like-
or whatever that means, but we're not, I mean, I'm not making fun of this in any way, shape, or form, but we're not all, right? There is other stuff around us.
Yeah, it's almost like if
Yeah.
Colt could just come a little bit further south and we meet them a little bit further north, then we could connect with Colt, you know, like in Campion or something like that, instead of, 47th Street, whatever that street is down there on the south end of Loveland. Just
So-
make those connections.
Oh, I didn't remember. I totally agree. And I think the assessment, I can't remember, this has been that long, but I know they looked at other areas. I know we're very, very unique in that we have our own service, and then we have rafts such, organic
also-
service. So I don't know, I can't remember. Did we list that out there? But I just remember them being like, there was no comparison really.
That was generally the answer. I don't know that we even addressed it much in the assessment like document because we didn't find a lot of examples of anything like us.
So I think,
I'm sorry,
No,
no,
go
but
ahead.
if it was 2019 as well, we've grown a lot and we've gotten a lot broader in our spectrum of the population that's here, right? So it would be, I think, useful to have that.
Have we doubled in size since 2019?
Well, I don't know if you were saying this specifically, but I do think it would be helpful to know what our neighboring communities offer that we can tie into.
Right.
Instead of driving more miles, to have that at that discussion table would be helpful to know what our neighboring communities.
you're talking about for seniors and disabled or for everyone?
For everyone.
All of
For-
the above.
For
Like
the
connecting with
current
Van Gogh
raft
even.
users.
Yeah.
Wait, now we're having two
That's-
conversations.
that would
May's
be-
talking about just seniors and the disabled, and I think the rest of us are looking at this as a holistic thing.
Well, I think,
Or-
I think both are important, but for the working session, it would be nice to know if there are things that they could tie into or partnerships that are available that we haven't thought of. Because part of that's, the conversation's gonna have, we're gonna talk about funding. We're gonna talk about how we're gonna afford to sustain a program of this size if it continues to grow. Even if it's just for seniors and disabled, if it grows to additional people that everyone decides. That's also gonna contribute to the need for additional funding, but if we are just talking about what it currently is and the two services absorb each other, then we need to identify what the funding structure is gonna be, and a cost savings might be how we can tie into other resources and
Yeah,
maybe
it's
they don't.
not cutting back anything that we already have. It's how do we grow what we got? I mean, the
Yeah.
need
And
for
sustain it,
disabled and
because the
seniors
cost
is gonna
is-
increase,
Yes.
as well as general ridership. So we just, I almost kind of feel like BATS has got to catch up with RAFT. And RAFT is going to continue to grow, and then we're going to continue to grow. So why can't we grow together and pool our funding? Because it's all about money when it comes down to it.
Is that clear as mud?
I think that
We're not talking scooters, that's one thing.
I think a study session's a good idea. And I think that's probably our next best step is to get together with the two groups based on the conversation tonight. That's my sense of it. I can reach out to the Larimer County facilitation team and see what their schedule looks like. I really have no idea of like how far out they may or may not be. If it's a really extended period of time, if the board's okay with it, we'll look at other kind of qualified facilitators that could come in and
Maybe even Greg or,
yeah, Greg Pyburn's a great facilitator, but, and I had talked to Greg about us doing a study session for kind of an update of our goals, in February, and I told him, hey, look, we've been doing development and transit, we got some other big picture items, so we're gonna hold off for a couple of months, but Greg would love to come and support, whatever it is you guys are doing too, so. In any case, I think, we'll look for a facilitation. We'll look at, when we could schedule that. I would expect it to be probably 30 days out at
Sure.
least.
And of course, RAF's interest, hopefully they want to participate.
Yeah. I would, I don't want to speak for Raft, but I would hope they'd participate, of course.
All right, good, we got that out there.
That seems like a slam dunk, but,
Throwing our hands
yeah.
up and.
Yeah.
Like, yes, touchdown.
And so we could start there.
I think that's great. I think that really is, and staff is doing a great job, RAF's knocking it out of the park, so I think this will be a great next step. Anything else? Awesome, all right. That concludes our regular agenda tonight. We'll move on to reports. We'll start off with Trustee Hardy.
Nothing to report.
Trustee Albrecht?
The only thing I had was just feedback from citizens who attend our meetings about the audio in our room. So if we we could continue to evaluate audio and make sure that people can hear no matter where they sit in the room, and then, or we need to have elevated microphone pickup here, and then making sure the audio is good on the recording as well, so people can hear it. And then, thank you so much for getting these are so cool.
You went above and beyond with the
Yeah,
leather on it.
They're even better than I was
Fancy, huh?
picturing. This is so great, so thank you so much. That's all I have.
Trustee Ayers.
So at the previous board meeting earlier in the month, I just wanted to bring to y'all's attention that the Platte Valley Hunting Club has approached the committee a couple times about the Jiskowski property. And I think they're supposed to be working with staff to stay informed. And they're supposed to come to the meeting. I suggested that they come to the meeting whenever Jiskowski comes up in the agenda. But just as a sort of broad overview of what they're saying, they are really interested in using the Jiskowski property as dog training, since that's what it was set up before. They've done this in the past. One of their sites up north of town, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, has closed access to hunting activities.
Maybe
And
that's
so-
Von Hagler Reservoir.
Wow.
Yeah. They are more than willing to work with the town, but they did have a couple of pretty big asks that would be, I guess, non-standard. One of those would be to be able to use the property before it was specifically open to the public. Another one was to possibly have dates set aside that it could be closed down for only their access. And we explained that that was kind of outside of standard behavior because of the problems with allowing access to a public property that's no longer public because it's closed down, but also giving them access to the gate code, that sort of thing. So I just told them to come to the meeting whenever that shows up on the agenda to give their voices specifically in person. They were used to working around open lands concerns. The dogs apparently don't really mess with the ecosystem because the lakes are built in such a way that the dogs can access the water. They're very well trained, so they're not just going to be like running around chasing frisbees and that kind of thing. They're in their kennel or they're working, and when they're working, they're not in the cattails and the actual wetland area. They're just in the water. They were interested in maybe signing up or giving presentations at some of the town functions like birthday days, et cetera, and one of the things that they said that they were willing to offer would be discounted or honorary memberships to town residents to be in the club, since they're basically using town property. Once again, those are just informational points. I told them to come give a presentation whenever Jiskowski comes in. I just wanted to make that on your radar because they've shown up a couple times to talk about Jiskowski property and their interest in working with the town in some way, shape, or form to kind of get in and be able to use that property in an official context.
So quick question on that, have they talked about having any type of fee structure that they would rent this space?
We're not allowed to charge money for the use of that property because of the conditions of its lease. That's correct, right? The Jiskowski property in the deed, we are not allowed to make money on that property because it was donated to the town.
So this is the conservation easement specifically prohibits commercial activity, and that was kind of broadly defined in the past by Colorado Open Lands. I think there's probably some workaround, but that same provision exists at the rec center.
Yeah.
And that was a big topic of conversation with them during the development of the rec center, because the rec center is obviously specifically an allowed use in the conservation easement. And when we had considered leasing the building to YMCA to run it instead of the town, similar to how Johnstown operates their rec center, Colorado Open Lands was generally opposed to that. And so we kind of went round and round in circles about it and then ultimately decided, hey, it's not worth worrying about. We really probably want to operate this with our own team anyway. I'm glad we made that decision, by the way. I think our team's doing a fantastic job. But nevertheless, there are some unique prohibitions in that conservation easement. So I think you're probably right, although I don't know specifically with Jiskowski property how that would apply. But renting it, like we asked them, could we do a golf course? And they were like, not if you charge for it. And actually they said no at all because that would damage the conservation values. So we said, well, could we open like a winery and event venue? Maybe it's like a wedding destination. It's a beautiful piece of property. Nope, can't do that. So we went, we went through a very long list of possibilities. Now, dog training is a specifically allowable use in the conservation easement. Because Ms. Jiskowski was really involved in dog training. So that's why a lot of these folks are familiar with that property because she used to host dog events out there when she owned it. And we've had a lot of conversations with the dog training groups over the last, 6-7 years. But I think that you're right. If we rent or lease the property for that specific use, that may be a problem under the conservation easement. But I actually don't know the answer to your specific question. Sorry, that was a very long
No,
answer.
that's fascinating to me. 'Cause I just was seeing opportunity if we have a niche group that could use it, and it could be a draw to our community because it's so niche. How could we capitalize on that opportunity? And maybe that we capitalize on just marketing that we have it and brings people to town. Maybe that's the gain is that otherwise,
We could buses bringing them to downtown Berthoud to spend their money.
sure. I mean, that's a pretty cool, unique
Capitalize.
use, and it would keep the property beautiful too. I don't know, just came to my mind while you were
Just as a bit of context, like when we first approached them about disc golf, their initial answer was, we don't think it's a good idea because people are going to be walking all over the place and damaging kind of the grasslands out there. So it just has, it has some unique restrictions. I think that's something we could work through.
It'd be seen as long as you can recover your costs. It seems like that would be appropriate if we're trying to prop
You would
up.
think so?
Yeah. Because I remember that with the rec center. Before you were here, they tried that with the Boys and Girls Club on a bubble facility at Wagner. And that was the thing well, this is commercial.
Yeah, and we kept saying, this isn't commercial, they're just operating it for
Right,
us. And they were
yeah,
like,
it's
no,
not a
this is
full-time.
not, yeah.
It's not a Choose Fitness, it's a YMCA.
Exactly.
fascinating.
Do you have any idea when that might be an agenda item?
In front of the board or the board committee?
Board?
No,
Because it's been in front of the board committee for
quite some time.
4.5, 5 years.
I think we finally have a concept that the board committee helped to prepare that Colorado Open Lands has signed off on generally. I did talk to Keith recently about when we bring this in front of the board, but I don't know that we've set a date yet.
Anyway, I just wanted to put that on your radar.
There you go.
Your turn.
You're good. All right, dang. Planner Johnson, did this get forwarded to you from me, that lady's buffer zone requests? I
I
fear
think she
that
responded to
I
it.
fear I never even sent that to you. Her gentle buffer, what is she called?
That was sent to us.
Okay, I just want to make, that was one thing. She looks like she put some work into this. I read it before, but do you have any thoughts on this? I mean, one, we do buffer zones, I thought, but this idea of doing it with just residential, do you know anywhere else that does that kind of stuff of transition, a slow transition gradient, high density, low density?
I am not aware, because I have not looked for something like that. But in our code, we do require buffers from like commercial to residential or industrial to residential or commercial, but different types of land uses, we do require buffers. We also require setbacks on lot lines, different backyard setbacks and others. Happy to look at it. This year, we are going to open up the entire land use code. We're gonna rearrange it and put things that are a little bit more organized, and there are some minor changes we'll be making. We can take a look at that. Really large buffers go against the grain of compact development. And compact development is in our comprehensive plan as well as our land use code. So it might just, it really is the vision of the town.
I think it's fair. My thought of buffer zones was it was between communities. So, I mean, I know that on the 98 1%, it said open space for buffer zones, but the idea was to protect Berthoud from Loveland. And
Exactly.
then that filled with the golf course, so we can follow our own law, but, or rule. But the idea of having it between same, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would be amenable to looking into this because I feel like some of the terminology in there was a better presentation of one of the issues that I had in one of the recent developments that came in front of us. That was, did you say compact development? What was was that the term? Compact development on open space didn't seem like a buffer because you have open space and then normal in-town residential density, right? And so the picture in my head, the problem that I was having with the way that that development was presented to us was that it seemed like incredibly dense development, fine, but then with nothing on the other side of it. And so it seemed a little bit, and I'm not disparaging the development in any way, but it seemed like it seemed like it was providing kind of an eyesore to the people who were using the open space to have such density right next to it. So moving forward, or an idea that I had that I didn't bring up, and sorry to take y'all's time right now on a kind of
Shame on
off-topic
you.
thing.
No, this is exactly what I was bringing
But
up. That's awesome.
maybe there could be something in the development code that next to open space, there is this feathered or
Similar
breaking up
density.
of the density, right, that
Similar
transitions from high density, which I think we need, and I'm not saying that that's not a good idea, but it was specifically the open space. It wasn't the density itself. Had that development been put somewhere else, I wouldn't have had a problem with it. But because that density was backed up specifically to something that is going to be, or that is offered as open space and parkland or whatever, it seemed not congruous to the idea of having the open space.
I understand, so it's looking at, and that's really tricky. We also have setback requirements from riparian areas and rivers and lakes for visual setbacks.
Right.
So we have those for natural areas, and I believe it's 150 feet minimum.
Right, but I'm not arguing, with you, right? I'm not concerned about the setbacks. Those are wonderful, right? My concern is, yes, there's a setback, but then there's, 105,000 foot lots next to that setback, and it kind of, to me, in that specific development, just because I'm picturing it in my head, it seemed antithetical to what we were trying to do with the setback. So if there were, and maybe this is just the development design itself, maybe it's not a problem with the code in itself, but it seemed like had the houses along the setback had lower density within that development, it wouldn't have been as excuse me, it would not have been as invasive to that view corridor and to the concept of having open space next to a development. So the setbacks that we have, I think are wonderful. It's just that that ability or possibility, I guess, for us to designate developments along riparian or along open space to allow them to spread out that specific lot line next to that setback or next to that open space, which takes away from the weight of the development itself. Because once again, had that development been somewhere else in town, I wouldn't have had any problem with it, with the setback being next to a park or something like that. But because it was a river corridor specifically, and because that river corridor is hypothetically going to be used as open space, that's the problem that I had with it.
And on the I'm gonna get too specific. On the other area, I love this, and I think it's important to buy protected open space. Otherwise, the lot next to it could go in 20 years and develop, and then we just have low density going in a weird direction. But if it's next to a permanently preserved open space county or town, I love that idea.
Well, and if I could contribute to that, because I 1000% agree with what you're saying and what the citizen brought up. And I think the general sentiment of the board in some of these decisions, I don't think that was a one-off development issue. I think this is our code is an issue because we're requiring the high density and the different types of uses of houses, so it's causing this congested development, which is appropriate in certain areas, but I think this is where we need to address our comp plan, like today, because we've hit roadblocks with these couple of ones that have come forward where we're seeing there's no feathering, there's no gradient, we're right at ag land that's gonna be forever ag land, and then a dense urban residential, and that is not congruous, like you're saying. And so I think we're back at that conversation where you're dealing with the code and we need to change it because the code is restrictive in that it has to be dense. And so if we don't look at our comp plan as saying these are the designated areas around Berthoud that's growing that needs to feather, like these properties, if they do develop, it needs to be larger lots or this many homes and not the different types of housing that every single development has to do.
Right. And I'm specifically concerned about the block, quote unquote, that is fronting, as you said, permanent
Right.
conservation land.
Right.
That's my concern.
Yeah.
Because I understand that anything might be developed at any time that might be a field now, and in 5 or 10 years or 15 or 20 years, it might be developed as well. I'm not concerned about that. My concern with that development was that conservation land that was going to be affected basically in perpetuity because of that single line of housing in that block on that side of the street backing directly up to the open space. I didn't have a problem with the rest of the development, it was just that
And for
was.
argument's sake, I don't think that developer wanted that, it was just that our code required that. And so if our code allowed him to do like 5 estates on that lot, so it was spread out and more open, he probably would have done that. It's just that our code is restricting development to be a certain way.
The developer could put in larger lots along that. Our code would certainly allow for that. In that case, I think, I don't want to speak on their behalf. I think they're just trying to maximize the amount of developable lots that they can fit in within, kind of within reason.
Diverse development within that, they have to have.
But there's no maximum lot size. You know, like, there's a minimum lot size, and there are a minimum number of product diversity types, but like single-family detached is one of those product types, which is what they were proposing there. They could have made those half-acre lots if they wanted to. The code doesn't prohibit that, they just didn't
But
choose to.
financially, they would never do that because we're requiring them to do other structures that are reducing their.
Perhaps, I think, you know, that's a good question, yeah. I do think the code allows for it, I just don't know what that decision-making process was, yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I didn't know this, I was thinking along Maze lines, I thought they were kind of, anyway, I don't want to get too specific with that. I'm actually thinking of a different development that this might apply to, but that's great, we might open this conversation up, sounds like there's some interest from trustees. When are we gonna open up, you were saying, to look at all the?
We're going to start walking through the reshuffled code and we're going to go section by section, but we're not going to bring a new, we're just gonna repeal and replace the entire land use code instead of doing it in bits and pieces. And it's going to be a big, heavy lift. Staff is doing it. And I anticipate you receiving the first draft probably this fall.
Okay. So this sounds like a full-blown update, a district update.
This is everything. We're scrubbing it. We're not doing a ton of heavy lifting. We're just scrubbing, doing some corrections of duplicated items or inconsistent items. We're rearranging the code, but there are things that we will open up and take a look at. Definitely we can look at that. And the one thing that's just really, I caution you is there's no other community like Berthoud, just like there's no other community like Fort Collins. And sometimes we have to take our land use code and there are lessons that are transferable that we can utilize. However, our code has to be for birth ed.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
Makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
And
so
as-
it's not a one size fits all.
Sure.
And as just a really brief follow-up to Ann's comment, the study sessions that we've had, the walkarounds that we've done, Ann is summarizing those. We'll be providing a memo to you in your one of your March packets, summarizing those discussions, summarizing what we've heard, summarizing what we think are those takeaways. And I think this is one of those takeaways for the items that we need to address as part of this code update. So the buffer zones, I think the lot diversity is an absolute fair point to bring up. I think it's something we can look at and consider, and how is that affecting development patterns? So I think we'll add those to that list.
And yeah, I think some of this, she's talked, there's multiple things in here, but it's view sheds or view corridors too. She's talking about a extreme difference in density real quick, which might block people's view. So that gentleness might help. And that's really important when we have really, in my opinion, the best view is the Twin Peaks. If we can preserve that in certain areas. And I know Ludlow is, so they're not like we're not. Great. I just rambled a lot, but it looks like we're at least looking into that we could maybe incorporate some of these thoughts into a discussion.
Yep, we'll definitely do that.
So I did forward this to you or not?
Yep, you
Okay,
did.
awesome. The other thing was we attended, May was there too, but did the chamber annual gala. So congratulations to B-Town Automotive for Business of the Year and our very own Karen Anderson of our planning for Citizen of the Year. So pretty cool. That was good turnout too. That's all my updates. Oh yeah, I also did the legislative workshop and training on Friday up at History Colorado in Denver. So learned about all the different bills going on right now and CML's stances on those. Very interesting. I don't know, a couple of them I'd love to get Sergeant Williamson's positions on. We might want to take stances on. CML's initiating some legislation around repeat offenders for retail. It's just really hard to get them to have to show up to court. They can kind of legally blow this off, and it's become a real issue. So CML has initiated legislation. The Greeley police chief came to speak on it, and I thought it was really good. So maybe if Sergeant Williamson agrees on the board, maybe some of these we want to take stances on. So I'll send those out. I think I have a link. I think CML has a link of all of those. And then also how to talk to your legislatures, different strategies on when people agree with you or disagree with you. So I thought it was really good overall. So that was the other thing I did last week.
Just a reminder, it would be great if you could send those bills out through Christian.
Sure.
And then he can distribute to the board, and that way we're not running afoul of the open meetings law by communicating among one another on things that could potentially be town business. So just as a reminder, it's always best to send your communications through to the rest of the board, through Christian or through Chris.
Okay. Great.
So let's do it that way when we can.
Sounds good. Anything else? Staff, turn it over to you.
Just a couple of updates for you tonight on some of your strategic plan items. The housing needs assessment is one of your strategic goals. There's been a lot of work done by the steering committee and the planning commission. The draft is going to the planning commission on March 17th, and it should come to you on the 25th for review. So that there's been a lot of progress there. The sustainability action plan should be coming to you in March. We're still waiting on some data assessment because we're waiting to get some customer data on electricity and gas usage from our dry utility providers, but hoping to get that initial assessment presentation to you in March, and then you hopefully will review that and provide feedback on the direction for any proposed initiatives that might.
For what is it, for gas?
The sustainability action plan.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, great.
Some of our open space acquisitions, just wanted to let you know that we had a great opportunity to present our project for the acquisition of the Shaw Farm and a portion of the Wilson Farm to GOCO. We submitted that application for $1 million grant to help support those two acquisitions. We presented our project to their grant review committee, and I think it was a very favorable review. we're hoping that in March that the GOCO board will approve our grant for that. So it's not a done deal, but I think that went very well. And we're gonna be hopeful that come mid-March, we'll have $1 million to support those open space acquisitions.
Wilson next to Beefus, I'm blanking on.
Immediately to the west.
Okay.
So we do not have a deal in place for that property. We've had a lot of negotiations and that developer's aware. We've talked about that previously with you guys. We're hoping to have a deal on paper soon, but the terms of that potential deal have changed. So I think there may be an opportunity to try and acquire more, and we'll likely come to you in executive session and talk about what the terms of that deal may or may not look like next meeting. So so there's some exciting potential changes there, but anyway, all of that's moving full steam ahead. We are still on target to close on April 1st on the Shaw property. We're waiting on the Alta survey to be done. That should be done early to mid-March, and that's kind of the last item on the list, and then we'll be prepared to close. So that'll be an exciting additional acquisition to our very large open space acquisitions. And I think we, when we presented our vision for the Little Thompson River Corridor and the open space work that we've already done, the financial support of Lewis Heritage Farm, the acquisition of the Beavis Farm, the current acquisition underway for the Shaw Farm, I think in most cases, everybody that was on that call, it was a very long list of people on that GOCO programs committee. There was a lot of kudos and wow, it's amazing that a small community is able to do this, and what an incredible example you guys are setting for the rest of the state. There was a lot of incredible feedback, so kudos to the board and to the community for having that vision to keep that going forward.
Can I make a request on that, Chris?
Sure.
If when those other acquisitions are complete, if they go through, can we please put out a press release on how much the staff has done to acquire any open space in the last few years? Because I don't think the public knows how big these efforts and strides have been. And it's so exciting that they should know this property that they're gonna have preserved forever.
100%.
That's exactly the words of our last meeting with the mayor. The lady came up afterwards. She's like, all we hear about is the Star apartment complex. And you just brought up the Beavis Farm, like, holy cow. So it made me think like,
Yeah, people need to know,
just
like.
know about it. I mean, you guys are doing a ton of great stuff.
Yeah. Put it in front of them all the time, like, look how exciting, you get this is yours.
I should do a better
Waste of
job
time.
too, so I'll get that open space.
100%. Yeah, thank you. That's an absolutely important suggestion. The community branding assessment is underway. You guys approved the contract with Chandler Thinks. They are expected to be here the second week of March. And so Stephanie will be reaching out to set up one-on-one interviews. There's a very long list of folks we've put together for interviews, focus groups, and those meetings. If you have any specific names, feel free to shoot them to us. They may already be on the list, but I don't want to miss somebody that you feel like, hey, this is somebody we really should talk to. We're going to do surveys too of the broader community, but there's a lot of people obviously we interact with every day that are very involved, and we're trying to grab from every cross section: business, nonprofit, religious leaders, youth sports, all these different potential groups and people that are focused on Bertha, the community, museum, Bertha Local, you name it. We have a very long list, but we'd love if you have somebody in mind. You go, these are people you got to talk to. Even if we already have it on the list, just shoot it to us.
Thank you for doing that. That's
And
gonna be a great cross-section.
I think it will be. I'm excited because I think having been through this process before, the feedback that we'll get, I'm confident will be really valuable. And these, folks like the team at Chandler Thinks are really good at drawing out feedback from people in creative ways to really give a wonderful synopsis of who we believe we are as a town, right? Who do we think we are? What is our reputation? What should we be focused on when we promote ourselves and, promote the town to the region and beyond? So it's going to be a fun process. And so hopefully you'll be able to meet with them one-on-one while they're here if you're not. And they'll be here, long hours during the 3 days that they'll be in town. So they'll be happy to work around schedules and those kinds of things if you can meet with them one-on-one. But we're excited about that. So you should be receiving those invitations very soon. Let's see. The town wastewater bond refunding, I know that's something we approved months ago. Interest rates still have not come back down enough for us to hit what we think are our minimum saving targets. So technically, in the ordinance that you approved, we had some criteria for issuing those bonds. We could meet that criteria today, except that what we really want is a net present value savings of at least 3%. That's a Government Finance Officers Association's recommendation. That's what we're really shooting for. So we have this kind of bare minimum criteria that's in the ordinance. We think we're really close. It's like a 2.6% net present value savings. We think we can get to 3 if we just hold out. So we're kind of watching the markets to see what happens. But that's why we still have not refunded those bonds. Again,
cool.
we're not extending out debt service. We're not paying more. The goal is to
Just holding it until it
keep
gets
the
back.
payoff date, refund, pay off some with our debt reserve fund because our credit rating has improved. And anyway.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. So just wanted to give you an update there. North Bertha Parkway Trail is underway, as you've probably seen. So we're excited that project's moving full steam ahead.
You're thinking June, maybe July?
Still thinking early June, I think, for completion of that project. Weather dependent, of course. Weather gets weird in March, as we all know. So there could be 18 inches of snow on the ground, and there could be 70-degree temperatures and sunny. So we'll hope for the latter. We'll have lots of snow in the mountains and none here. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, perfect.
And then lastly, I can't remember if we brought this up, but it's on my list, and I just wanted to point it out. In case you haven't seen, our park staff worked with Berthoud Local. We put together a refined plan for the community garden in Pioneer Park. And rather than contract it out, our park staff actually did most of that work over the winter. Built raised beds, new pergola, and kind of gathering space for educational opportunities. All driven by kind of what Berthoud Local felt like were good needs for them and continuing to successfully operate that community garden. And I think it's fantastic. It's not a completely final because there's going to be some plantings and thing that happens when the weather gets good. But if you haven't been by there, cruise by in Pioneer Park, you'll see it's a fairly significant, dramatic transformation. I think Berthoud Local's thrilled about it, and our park staff's really happy with how it's turning out too. So just wanted to mention that to you. And the very last thing, our utility rate study and impact fee study is underway. We did get our first draft a couple of weeks ago, and I think there were some flaws in some of the assumptions that the consulting team made. So we corrected some of those. They're reworking those numbers, and we're expecting to have a draft soon, a refined draft that I think should better reflect. They misunderstood some of the financial information that we sent them about our current reserves and where those reserves can be used. And so when they were putting together long-range financial plans to develop a rate structure, the rate structure didn't make sense because they were using funds as if they were available for certain uses that they're not. And so that's okay. That's not an unreasonable, it wasn't an unreasonable assumption to make, but it requires some rework. So that's why it hasn't come to you yet. We are still working on that project and hope to have a draft to you to look at probably in April. So just so that you know that's the direction we're heading.
Are you, with that, is the goal to be mid-range or to get what we need?
The goal is always to get what we
Okay.
need. The
I
scope.
don't care about developers, but I think
Yeah.
what we need comes second to their profitability.
Yeah, the goal is always to get what we need. So on the impact fee side, we want to make sure that the amount that we're collecting from each new house is kind of relative to the impact that it creates. So that whole nexus study is designed to create that clear understanding.
One day we'll get out of this server room. We'll get out of this basement.
That's right. And by the way, I have a beautiful plan to do that. It's just a lot more money than we have. So
Well, but I think this really ties into it. I think
it does.
that's-
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely does.
What we need will be, since COVID, will be drastically more expensive. But I think they just need to prepare that that's the cost.
And that, what we want is a really clear study that's defensible so that when we do bring it to you and hopefully you adopt or approve the fee structure that we recommend, and we get challenges from builders associations and others, we have a good study that clearly outlines why those fees are what they are. So we want to make sure that study's tight and that it's accurate and it reflects what we do. And then on the rate side, that's what our existing residents pay for water and sewer services. We want to make sure that is really clearly tied to what does it cost to provide the service. And on both studies, those are two parallel studies running at the same time. but independent of each other. On both studies, part of the scope of work is then to also do a comparison of a wide swath of agencies around us, just as a sanity check, right? Like, if we brought back impact fees to you for new development that were 400% more than any community around us, maybe we want to do that, maybe we don't, but at least that gives us some comparison to say, like, what are we doing wrong if that's the case, or what's everybody else doing wrong?
Mhm.
And the same is true on the rate side. So, you know, we don't want to be the most expensive rate in the region. We don't want to be the cheapest necessarily, unless that is what it actually costs to maintain the system. But if we say, hey, look, we think to operate the system, it's going to require X rate, and that puts us at like the second or third highest utility rates in the region, we might want to double check and make sure that what we're accounting for is really what we should be accounting for. Because obviously part of that rate structure is built to replace existing infrastructure and existing pumps and water treatment systems, not new stuff, but just the stuff we already own.
Yeah.
Making sure that we're conservative and reasonable in those assumptions and all those things. But if right now, we're kind of right smack in the middle in the region. And I would hope and expect that we'll still be there when we get through this rate study. But in any case, that's the process we're going through. So, and that's it for me.
Awesome. I heard a new title. Did something happen here, or did this already been announced and I just missed it?
Something did happen.
Okay.
We haven't made a big announcement yet, but
It just slipped when you said
noticed that too.
something economy in sustainability or something.
economic sustainability. So
Ah.
Walt is transitioning in his career and towards retirement, and so we're starting to set up our organization to adjust for that. Stephanie Horvath, who's our community outreach specialist, is now our community engagement manager. I think I mentioned this at a meeting prior.
Yeah, but Stephanie and Ton, I knew. I just didn't know.
And Brian will be serving as our economic sustainability manager. And so we've taken what Walt does, and we've split that into, or the intention is that as we move forward, we'll be splitting that into two positions, Stephanie and Brian. Brian will continue to handle his sustainability efforts, dark sky, all of our sustainability programs, some water conservation stuff he's already doing. So when Mark mentioned we got to have dark sky in a job description, I'm pretty sure it's in Brian's job description.
You didn't let me know today when we were having that meeting. I was like, oh, we'll have to put it on a planner.
But maybe I left out dark sky specifically, so we'll double check that. But he'll also handle the traditional economic development work
Oh, there you go.
for
Well, congratulations.
regional economic development kind of stuff. And then Stephanie, her focus will be on downtown business support. So community engagement, downtown business support. And then our expectation is that we'll hire some either part-time or full-time staff members to support their efforts as well, to build out those teams. So we're gonna take kind of the local piece of business support and retention and put it in Stephanie's box, and Brian will take on kind of the primary employment and regional kind of economic development work, and take that on, and also, like I said, keep his sustainability work as well.
I think both great picks. I think you guys are really, truly both perfect for that job. Just the connections and your attitude. Thank you. Perfect. Anything from legal?
No, I'm just very pleased to hear about the way the impact study and the rate study is going, and always makes the attorney very happy to know that they have a client who is doing that correctly.
Anything
Thank
from
you.
law enforcement by chance? Okay, cool. Did I cut you off?
No.
All right, anything else? Yeah, how'd that
Oh,
go?
sorry, I should have mentioned that too.
People have asked.
Yeah, so we removed the old kind of box sign, all the paint and the vinyl was peeling off, the electrical didn't work. We're getting a nice new, what I would call like a more kind of dimensional carved sign with those downlights that got added to the building.
Okay.
And there's been some interesting challenges with the electrical, and there needs to be some stucco patch and repair. We're probably still 2 weeks out, unfortunately. We did get approval from our planning department for our sign. It is consistent with our sign.
Have to go to his own variance program.
It is consistent with our sign code. But yeah, so we're hoping to have a new sign up on the building. It'll say Berthoud Town Hall instead of Town of Berthoud. So that's clear to everybody. This is Town Hall. The old one said Town of Berthoud. This one will say Berthoud Town Hall. But it'll be, it's raised lettering, and but it'll all be downlit instead of internally lit, which the old sign was. Our code doesn't allow internal illumination in box signs anymore. So
That'll be an update.
Also kind of putting our money where our mouth is a little
Yeah,
bit when we
absolutely.
have a sign that's not
Did
consistent
you
with
apply
our
for
current
the
sign
sign
code.
grant?
We did not, we did not apply for a sign grant.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.